It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from a book edited by Rex Stout back in the 1940s. It's titled The Illustrious Dunderheads, and it's speeches given mostly by Republican congressmen in Congress on the floor of the House and the Senate, talking about how we should not support England or Britain in their fight against Hitler, and how Hitler's a guy we can work with and all this sort of thing. If you saw the Churchill movie, Darkest Hour, this book will ring a lot of bells for you. It's out of print. There are used copies floating around. This is a copy my father gave me as a gift years ago. So, The Illustrious Dunderheads by Rex Stout. It's a collection of speeches, as I said. The first one is by George Bender, the Republican representative from Ohio. And this is July 11, 1940. I wish to call attention to the statement made by an expert, Colonel Lindbergh. Quote, "Let us not be confused by this talk of invasion by European aircraft. The air defense of America is as simple as the attack is difficult when the true facts are faced. We are in danger of a war today not because the European people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of America, but because American people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of Europe. Regardless of which side wins the war, there is no reason, aside from our own actions, to prevent a continuation of peaceful relationships between America and the countries of Europe." Then on September 3rd, 1940, he said, "Any device at all that suits the convenience of the president." Keep in mind, FDR was president, and the Republicans didn't want to fight against Hitler because they thought it would get FDR elected for a third term as a wartime president. That was what this was all about. "Any device at all that suits the convenience of the president is used in order to get us into this war by the back door. The power of peacetime conscription in the hands of an administration that is proved by its record to have used every conceivable excuse for regimenting America, overturning all tradition, and changing our form of government is nothing but an invitation to disaster. We know that our people hate everything that Hitler stands for. We despise dictatorship in any form, but I challenge anyone to tell us the difference between executive orders issued by Roosevelt and those issued by Hitler." Republicans in 1940. But wait, there's more. This is from Hamilton Fish, Republican representative from New York State. This is June 22nd, 1940. "Colonel Lindbergh was right when he said in one of his recent speeches, 'Let us stop this hysterical chatter about calamity and invasion that has been running rife these past few days. It is not fitting to the people who built this nation. The only reason we are in danger to becoming involved in this war is because there are powerful elements in America who desire to take part in a war against Hitler.'" Then on June 22nd, 1940, he gave a speech at the House of Representatives. He says, "Let us have an end to the secret diplomacy and the secret commitments of President Roosevelt that have brought ruin and disaster to France and from which we have escaped only by a miracle, and the will of the American people expressed through Congress to keep America out of war." This was the America First movement back then. President Roosevelt alarmed the nation by his inflammatory Italian dagger thrust in the heart speech. And on August 5th, Republican Representative Hamilton Fish said, "Whom do we fear? Do we fear Hitler, who seems afraid to attack England over 20 miles of sea when he would have 3,000 miles to cross here? This is preposterous. Let us stop this fear hysteria." And then on September 3rd, he said on the floor of the House, Republican Representative Fish of New York, "Peacetime conscription in America is the direct road to Hitlerism, dictatorship, and National Socialism." So he didn't want Roosevelt to start the draft. "If we adopt peacetime conscription, we are merely copying Nazi methods and ideology. Mr. Speaker, this Roosevelt Far Eastern policy of bluff and bluster has driven Japan into the hands of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. No one in Japan really wants war with the United States, but it's quite evident that this highly proud and militaristic nation has got tired of being threatened and slapped in the face by us. We must not let our sympathies run away with our judgment and involve us in any Asiatic war 10,000 miles away that has no connection to the defense of the American continent. We have more to fear from the war makers within our country than from our enemies without. Yeah, got more to fear from Franklin Roosevelt than from Adolf Hitler. This is from Claire Hoffman, Republican representative of Michigan. And this is from a speech that Mr. Hoffman gave September 7, 1940. Mr. Speaker, down into the hell of a war, in no sense our war, this president would plunge us to satisfy his ambition to break the American tradition that no man should be elected a third time to the presidency, and in order that he may go down in history as America's first dictator. Yes, this is Republicans speaking on the floor of the House of Representatives, calling FDR a dictator in 1940. This is 1 year after Hitler had invaded Poland. Back to the quote. He told us, in effect, that we had no national defense, that we were open to successful invasion by a foreign foe. Thus, he created fear and hysteria. As on other occasions, when he had satisfied his penchant for theatrics by shouting "fire, fire" and calling Congress in special session at a cost of $500,000, he, figuratively speaking, now tucks his tongue in his cheek and goes off on a vacation. It is to be hoped on this one he will not, as he did on a prior occasion, see a mythical submarine. Roosevelt's threat to use the sovereignty of government is the threat of a Hitler, of a Mussolini, a Stalin, to silence all opposition and all criticism. He has consistently arrayed class against class, preached envy and jealousy, the doctrine of hatred and fear, and his egotism is only equaled by his ignorance when we assume that patriotic Americans will tamely submit. The illustrious Dunderheads. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, one day to go. Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Tomorrow is the day that decides the fate of America. And boy, what a consequential election. It is remarkable. We have a big program today, a big show. In the first hour, first of all, I want to start out telling you about this amazing thing I learned about Canada over the weekend, and wrote an op-ed about it that I'm going to be sending off here at the top of the next hour, actually. Tom Perez is going to drop by with us at the bottom of the first hour here at 34 minutes past the hour. Bernie Sanders is going to join us right after that at 45 minutes past the hour. In our second hour, Anthony Scaramucci is going to drop by and try to convince us all that Donald Trump is the blue-collar president. Isn't he a nice guy? That should be fun. And Joe Madison is going to open our third hour. The Black Eagle, the Joe Madison Program, the Joe Madison Show over on Sirius XM. He just brought the house down at the Apollo Theater a couple of days ago, talking about millennials, the difference between a movement and a moment. And we're going to get into that with our old friend Joe on in the third hour of the program. But let me get right into, and we also have a quote for the day. Remember, yeah, here it is. Remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. All right. Okay, I wanted to start out by telling you this incredible thing I learned. First of all, kind of the setup. We all know that the Republican Party in large parts of the United States, particularly in red states where they control the voting process, they have really taken, only hold power by virtue of the fact that they control who can vote and whether their vote gets counted or not. The Republican Party has completely taken to heart Joe Stalin's old advice, famously said back in the 30s, that it doesn't matter who votes. What matters is who counts the votes. And so, their main electoral strategy outside of fear, 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 and isn't it wonderful that we cut taxes for billionaires, which are the obvious electoral strategies. Their main one is voter suppression, or as I prefer to call it, election fraud, as opposed to voter fraud. This is not the voters engaging in fraudulent activity. This is the people who run the elections. This is election fraud. They do it with purging people from the voting rolls. We saw if you look at the period from 2006 until 2008, right, from that midterm until that presidential election, and you compare that with 2014 to 2016, midterm to presidential election, just in that one cycle, just the difference between those 2-year periods, there was a 33% increase in the number of people purged from the voting rolls in the 2014 to 2016 era versus 2006 to 2008. And I'm doing this from memory, but as I recall, it was around 10 or 11 million people in the 2006 to 2008 and around 12 million in the 2010 to 2012, up to 2016. But if you look at just the last year, now keep in mind, in none of these previous 2-year periods was it more than 12 million people purged over a 2-year period. In just the last 12 months, 14 million people have been purged. So they have that. That's one strategy. And that requires states that have voter registration systems, which we got as a result of Jim Crow. Voter registration came into being in the United States in a big way during Reconstruction as a way of making, just preventing people from voting, just plain old flat out. It was, in the South, it was preventing black people from voting. In the North, it was preventing poor people from voting. And and we have one state, North Dakota, that doesn't require voter registration. So voter registration is itself historically part of a voter suppression effort, number one. And then number two, you've got virtually every Republican-controlled state in the union now has adopted these ALEC, model legislation or variations on them of voter suppression tools with using voter ID. So the people who don't drive can't vote. So the people who are poor can't vote. So people who are old enough that they no longer drive can't vote. So people who are students living on campus but don't drive can't vote. So, basically the only people who can easily vote are middle-class white people and of course, upper middle class and wealthy white people. So these two strategies combined are why we have gone from 60 years of the Democrats controlling the House, the Senate, and in many cases, the White House. The exceptions were the treason of Nixon and the treason of Reagan to become presidents, and the Supreme Court handing George W. Bush the presidency. But this is why the Democrats, for so long controlled everything up until the Reagan era when they started screaming about voter fraud and putting these systems in place. So I got a note from a guy named Tarek. He's a listener in Canada to my program over the weekend, and he writes, here in Canada, citizens and permanent residents alike are covered by publicly funded health care that is administered through the provinces, whereas temporary residents must be covered by other means, namely buying private health insurance. So, in other words, everybody who's a citizen, everybody who's eligible to vote, has free health care in Canada, right? Or, it's not free, but has Canada's Medicare program. So he continues, since it's in everyone's best interest to have free health care coverage, free in quotes, unlike other government-issued identifications such as driver's licenses, et cetera, the vast majority, if not all, Canadians from all socioeconomic backgrounds make sure to obtain their health cards. which can be used as an official photo ID for flying domestically. I looked this up on the Canadian website. The ID card, their Medicare ID card in Canada looks like a driver's license here. It's got your picture, it's got your address, it's got all your information on it. It's got barcodes and holograms, and I mean, you know, it's a real thing, right? So anyhow, can be used as official photo ID for flying domestically, buying alcohol, and more importantly, voting. And in fact, I went to the Vote Canada website. If you do the search on this, you have to search the domain .ca rather than .com. And you find the government websites, and there's one about how to get your, you know, here's your photo ID for your Medicare program. And the other is, you know, the ID that is acceptable for voting. Yeah, they require ID across Canada to vote. And at the top, literally at the top of the list, is your Medicare card, which every Canadian citizen has. And the people in Canada who are living there who are not citizens doesn't have. It's real simple. So now we know why the Republicans for 30 years have fought so hard against a national health care system in the United States. Because that's why it's so easy to vote in Canada. That's why everyone in Canada has easy access to the polls. That's why they can't purge your name off the voting rolls. So in the United States, if we were to create a single-payer healthcare system and provide an ID just like Canada does, and then say, you know, and then as Democrats start winning, which they would do as a result of this because it would increase voter turnout. I mean, we all remember Paul Weyrick's famous quote. Here it is, coming out of the 360, Sean.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome, good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
So this has been that was 1980, right, when he was working on the Reagan campaign, and he's the co-founder of the Moral Majority. He's the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, and he's the co-founder of ALEC, this guy that you just heard. And ALEC, of course, has been distributing this model legislation. So now we know the real reason why Republicans are scared to death of a national health care system. It'll make it easy for everyone to vote if we do it the way that most other countries do it. Which is pretty amazing when you think about it. And also is why, you know, a national health care system should be policy issue one if the Democrats take any power at all in this election, and particularly in 2020. We got other news to share with you, and we'll be picking up your calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
What's your sense of how this election is going? And do you think it's possible that if the Democrats take the House, that could actually help Trump? I'm skeptical. And welcome back. Let's see here, Brian in Dubuque, Iowa. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tom. I just wanted you to mention to Bernie Sanders that I wish he would have been at the very least the vice presidential running mate, and I hope he runs for president. And I would like to be able to vote, but I was busted when I was about 27, 28 years old for growing a few marijuana plants for personal use only in my closet. And it was one of those narc-off deals where some guy did a bunch of bad things and got a lesser sentence for narking me off, you know, for telling on me. So, yeah, you know, I'd love to vote, but I can't. And
Iowa has felon disenfranchisement laws?
I believe so. It was Illinois at the time.
But you should double check. You know, most of those laws, I think there's only 5 or 6 states now that still have those laws, and I thought they were all in the South.
I'll have to look into it. My older brother has a friend who's a judge of some sort, a state's attorney judge or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Kind of way up there. So maybe I can talk to him or something. I don't know.
Well, that's another thing. You can petition a court to clean up your record. or you can petition
Yeah.
the state to let you vote. But I would double check that Iowa actually disenfranchises felons before I just gave up on it.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it, Tom.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, good luck, Brian. And let
Thank
me know
you
how it
very
works
much.
out. Thanks a lot for the call. Peter in Bellingham, Washington. Hey, Peter, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to follow up on your thinking about the Canada Health Card
Right.
deal. If we were to use Social Security numbers instead of names, and the names is what gets people knocked off the lists with the Kobach purging business.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to have things based on names. It's just too easy to mess with.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And if we also were to change our Social Security cards so that instead of a flimsy little piece of paper, you get a card that, you go in, have your picture taken, and you get a card, and of course, you have to prove your citizenship to even get a Social Security card. And
exactly. The other thing that could be
well,
done
hang on just a second. No, wait a minute. I'm wrong about that. Green card holders can get Social Security cards. So that doesn't, although, it could be like, Real ID or something. I mean, there could be a little star indicating that you're a citizen versus no star you're not, or something like that.
Well, every polling place could have, like you put a credit card in an ATM machine. It tells you, it brings up your information immediately.
They're doing this at the airport now. I flew out of the Portland airport last week, and, you get up to the security line, and they want to see your driver's license and your boarding pass. The guy says, I don't need your boarding pass anymore. Just hand me your driver's license. I handed it to him, and he slid it into a little slot in a reader, as if it was putting a chip into a reader to pay something with a credit card. And it read my driver's license, matched it to the flyer's database. What came up on the screen was the flight that I was on. He confirmed I was on this flight, that I was who I was, and it showed a picture of me on his screen. It was amazing.
Well, also, the state driver's license could be based on a universal Social Security identity number.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But, I mean, we need to get it out of driver's licenses. Thanks a lot, Peter. That's a good idea. Some of the other news of the day, I asked the question, would Trump be better off or worse off if the Democrats take the House? And over at the Daily Beast, Mike Lewis wrote this piece titled, Why Losing the House Could Be Good for Donald Trump. And he points out that basically every president who has lost his first midterm to the other party goes on to win re-election. Nixon, Reagan, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, all of them lost a branch of Congress during the first midterm, and it gave them a foil. In fact, he goes back to Harry Truman. He says Harry Truman campaigned famously in the 1952 election, 1948 election, campaigned, which was, he was running for re-election, although he was never elected the first time. It was because FDR died, but, whatever you want to call it. But he had lost the House in that previous election cycle. And then in 48, in the 46 election, he became president in 45. He lost the House in 1946 for one cycle, actually. It was that one anomaly, or actually there were two anomalies after the war. Another one, another 2-year period in the 60s, as I recall. Maybe it was the 50s. But anyhow, there was that 46. And then he goes on to win the 48 election. And Harry Truman campaigned on the, quote, do-nothing Congress, attacking the fact that the Republicans had seized control of the House of Representatives. So Lewis is asking the question, if the Democrats take the House, Trump will certainly spend the next 2 years bashing the Democrats for not passing things that are deceptively titled. He'll come up with something like the Clean Air Act, which actually makes pollution easier. Or, the Clean Water. I mean, we saw this with George W. Bush, right? The Clean Water Act. Or, tax cut for the middle class or whatever. And it won't be, of course. I mean, he'll come up with some BS, lie-filled legislation. The Republicans are really, really good at this, and they name their legislation brilliantly. I mean, the Democrats come up with things like the Children's Health Insurance Program, otherwise known as CHIP, which makes you think of cow patties, right? but the Republicans, it's the Patriot Act. It's, oh, geez. But anyhow, he'll do that, and he'll run against the Democrats because they control the House, number one. And number two, if we take the House by only 5 or 10 seats, on pretty much every issue, there's 5 or 10 sellout Democrats in the House of Representatives. I mean, unfortunately, sorry, you just can't get around that. And but that's the case. By the way, we had a caller during the last break who said that he's in Utah. No, he wasn't in Illinois. He committed the crime in Illinois. He's now living in it wasn't Utah. Where did he say he was living? Oh, Iowa. He's living in Iowa. Yeah. Okay. Iowa's one of the states where you permanently lose your right to vote if you're a felon. Amazing. Anyhow, so Matt Lewis is asking the question, will this help Trump? And I think in that regard, probably it will. I mean, he certainly will use it. But on the other hand, what Lewis is not putting into this formula, and I think it's a big piece of the formula, a very big piece of the formula, actually, is that, there are 14 committees in Congress, and each one will now be run by a Democrat instead of a Republican, and they'll be able to subpoena things to actually demonstrate the lies and the crimes of the first 2 years of the Trump administration. I mean, just show it nakedly to the American public. So the question is, which will do more political damage or more political assistance to both Trump and the Republicans? Showing their lies while you can't get anything done legislatively because the Republicans still control the White House and Trump can veto anything and will probably control the Senate. Or being able to be the foil against which Trump basically runs for president. You'll recall, unlike any other president in the history of the United States, Trump declared his candidacy for 2020 the day after he was inaugurated and opened a campaign committee, and has been aggressively fundraising for that campaign committee ever since. And that campaign committee, of course, is paying the legal fees of his children. They're paying his legal fees. They're paying the legal fees of a bunch of other people on his staff, with regard to all the Trump-Russia investigations and all the other crimes that he's committed and that he's defending. It's basically become a giant legal slush fund filled with money from Fox News watching suckers. But in any case, how is this going to play out? I'm inclined to think that, Trump is going to do everything he can to use fear and to lie about Democrats and whatnot. But I think that once they control the committees, if somebody will sit them down and Democrats, I've done this kind of consulting for businesses for 30 years. I'd be glad to do it for you if you'd like. I wrote a book about this in 2008 called Cracking the Code. We approached the Democratic Party and they were like, no, we got our consultants. We know what we're doing. But in any case, if they have half a brain, they will figure out how to conduct these hearings in a way that is high theater, because that's all they'll have, right? They will have the bully pulpit of being the chair people of the committees and being able to conduct investigations with subpoena power, and that's a big deal. That is a Joe Biden BFD, right? That's huge. And if the Democrats use this theatrically, I think they're going to have considerable power. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see how it all plays out. Coming up, and we'll get to your calls. I'm sorry, I know a bunch of people are on hold here about this issue, and I should have picked up your call in that break because I just realized I got Tom Perez after the bottom of the break, the bottom of the hour, and then right after that, Senator Bernie Sanders. But we'll get you in here. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Up next, Tom Perez with the DNC. Stick around. We're reading today from Justin Frank, Dr. Justin Frank's book, Trump on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the President. He's the guy who wrote Bush on the Couch and Obama on the Couch. He's a psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And the book just came out. This is from the introduction. There's no question that Trump is mentally unfit in ways that make him psychologically unsuited for the presidency. That in itself is a truly alarming turn of events. And I'd write the entire book in all caps if I thought that would better convey the sense of urgency with which it is written and should be read. Any number of troubling mental illness diagnoses and character evaluations can be and have been accurately applied to Trump. Both can vary from analyst to analyst, however, without necessarily sacrificing any of the accuracy. More to the point, the true value of a diagnosis is to determine an appropriate course of treatment, and there's no indication that any sort of treatment is a viable option. Trump on the Couch then seeks not simply to make the case that Trump is not well, but rather to show how he is unwell in ways that would have been of particular interest to the applied psychoanalysts whose investigation likely preceded our own, the Russians, and perhaps even their American allies or counterparts, who in the long tradition of intelligence gathering examined Trump's psyche and found an opportunity for exploitation. Trump's presidency caps a lifetime of dysfunction and disorder that is not likely to be healed while he is in office, just as Trump's ascendancy among voters gives expression to long-standing trends in the American electorate's psyche that are not going to be easily addressed. However, if we can identify certain aspects of these disorders and trends that may have contributed to Trump and his voters fusing into a shared belief system, then we have a better chance of fostering the kind of honest cultural discussion that will be necessary in order to contain and repair the damage that has already been done. Understanding Trump calls for a consideration of his psychodynamics almost certainly more rigorous than he has ever embarked upon on his own. Trump dismissed psychotherapy as a crutch in his 2004 Playboy interview. Years later, talking to biographer Michael D'Antonio, he described in greater detail a generalized aversion to introspection beyond the therapeutic setting. Quote, "I don't like to analyze myself because I might not like what I see," he told D'Antonio. "I don't like to analyze myself. I don't like to think too much about the past." End of quote. Even armed with a detailed family history, we can't capture Trump in action with only the tools of applied psychoanalysis. Like some of the most disturbed patients I've worked with, Trump is so erratic, constantly changing the topic, elevating the stakes, and raising the volume, that one doesn't know what to expect from him next. It's hard to imagine him in treatment, even as the subject of an applied psychoanalytical investigation. He behaves like a patient who is simultaneously banging in the consulting room window, rattling on its door, ringing the phone, and texting or tweeting his demands for attention. Trump presents so many troubling affects that it's hard to remember them all. In the final weeks of the first year of Trump's presidency, Michael Wolff and David K. Johnston published accounts of the Trump White House that present a president with a startling number of disturbing characteristics. Any one of these demonstrable and suspected traits would raise calls for a psychoanalytic investigation if it was done on a layperson. In a president, in aggregate, they are truly cause for alarm. The list of worrisome evident and alleged attributes that emerge in these and other portraits is long. Narcissist, liar, racist, sexist, adulterer, baby, hypocrite, chiseler, tax cheat, outlaw, psychopath, paranoid, fraud, ignorant, vengeful, delusional, arrogant, greedy, contemptuous, unsympathetic, learning disabled, cruel, obstructor of justice, threat to the Constitution, traitor. The list is so long that it can be overwhelming. It's a challenge to remember the beginning by the time you make it to the end. There are times when I wish someone would help us remember all the troubling aspects of Trump's character and behavior, past and present, in a way that would encourage recognition of the totality of his pathology, rather than its component parts, which individually cause alarm before being temporarily forgotten when the next emergency presents itself. As an applied psychoanalyst, my task is not only to appreciate the full list, but also to ignore the big picture and focus on a single pathology at a time. Practitioners of applied psychoanalysis approach their subject as both theoretician and clinician. The theoretician endeavors to piece things together, to figure things out, while the clinician tries to approach each session capable of being surprised, as if his mind were a blank slate. The analysis in the following pages aspires to accomplish both goals: reviewing Trump's record with a clinician's eye, preparing to be surprised by the unexpected observation, and assembling these findings into a more comprehensive portrait. The image of hypothetical patient Trump rattling the consulting room door and banging on the window reminds us that President Trump doesn't want us to see the entire list at once. Not only that, but patients I've treated who are reminiscent of Trump cannot tolerate being inside the consulting room either. They leave my office whenever they feel unable to think their way through an anxiety-provoking interpretation, much the way Trump leaves press briefings when the questions get too close. Trump on the Couch by Justin Frank. All aboard! It's a once-in-a-lifetime luxury Alaskan cruise on the Regent Seven Seas Mariner, July 24th, 2019. For more information, Keen Luxury Travel, 800-856-1155. And did I mention we'll be getting active on board with special events with yours truly, me and Louise, as we visit Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, Sitka, Hubbard Glacier, and Anchorage.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us, Tom Perez. He is the chair of the DNC, former Secretary of Labor in the Obama administration. Democrats.org is the website. You can tweet him at Tom Perez. Chairman Perez? Welcome. Secretary Perez?
You got it right to begin with, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back. I was just talking about how if the Democrats, there's this piece in Daily Beast, which is almost like voter suppression, talking about how every time, all the way back to Harry Truman, every time a president loses the House during an election, in his first term, the first election, the first midterm after he's elected, he goes on to win re-election because he then uses the opposition party as a foil for the next 2 years. I think I disagree with this. I think that the theater that can be done by having chairs of individual committees conduct hearings using subpoena power could be overwhelmingly powerful and could just completely blow that out of the water. But it'll only happen if your committee chairs are schooled in how to do theater. There's no doubt in my mind Adam Schiff knows how to do it, and Maxine Waters knows how to do it. But there's a bunch of others who, I hope you're sitting down with some good consultants and talking about how do we do, because theater is basically all you're going to have, but it could be damn powerful stuff. What do you think?
Well, we've got others, too, like Elijah Cummings from my home state of Maryland.
Yeah, he's very good.
Not been shy, and they understand the importance of oversight. Yeah, we all know that Donald Trump is the most dangerous president in American history, but I think what is undertold about this is the appalling silence and complicity of Republicans. And that's one of the many reasons we need to elect Democrats tomorrow. Remember in the Obama administration, Tom, when a scandal was when Barack Obama wore a tan suit?
Right, or when he held a coffee cup while he was saluting the Marine at the helicopter. Or put his feet on the desk. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah, throw the bum out. Yeah, right. It's the culture of corruption here is off the charts. Goodness gracious, the former HHS secretary, that's like 10 scandals ago. Yeah. And this is taxpayer money. You've got HUD, you've got EPA, you've got Interior. Yeah. Goodness gracious, Jeff Sessions. The list goes on. And frankly, the more important point I would make, or the equally important point I would make, to dispute that piece, is that people are suffering right now. People are going to bed tonight wondering, am I still going to have coverage for my pre-existing condition?
Right.
People are wondering, is anyone going to do anything about the fact
that's the other half of the theater, too.
If I mean, this is about real people. Our party is about helping real people deal with today's problems and build a better tomorrow for them and their kids. That's what we're doing in the Democratic Party.
I absolutely agree. And we live in a political world, and we have media that is entirely driven by theater. And we've seen this is how Donald Trump became the Republican nominee. It's how he became president in large part, was the media giving him $2 billion worth of free airtime. Why? Because he was telegenic, because he knew how to do reality TV, because he knew how to basically, get on TV. And, we talked about the committee chairs and the subpoena power. The other thing is, if you control the House, if you can keep your caucus whipped into line, you can start passing really cool legislation, even though it won't be made into law. People are not going to stop suffering as a consequence of this because the Senate will stop it or Trump will stop it. But, passing a Medicare for all legislation, passing, good climate change legislation, passing a minimum wage increase, passing, the priorities.
Infrastructure.
But if you pass them,
infrastructure bill that puts people to work.
But see, this is the thing. When George Bush was president, he wanted to pass legislation that would make it easier for the Koch brothers factories to dump more air pollution into the air. What did he call it? The Clear Skies Initiative. He wanted to pass a law that made it easier for the coal companies to dump waste into rivers. What did he call it? The Clean River, or the Clean Water. You remember what it is? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
they came up with a law that basically guts our civil liberties. What did they call it? The Patriot Act. On the other hand, we come up with legislation like the Children's Health Insurance Program, and we proudly call it the CHIPS Program, which reminds you of something you have to avoid when you're walking through a cow pasture. Can we start doing some damn good marketing here, sir, please?
Well, I'll tell you, toward that end, we are fighting to pass a DREAM Act, and I actually think the DREAM Act is well named because
that actually is, yes.
And we should allow. America is the only country that our dreamers have ever known, and we should be allowing them not only to continue to stay here, but we should be providing them with a pathway to citizenship. The first fatality in the most recent war in Iraq was an immigrant from Guatemala, Jose Gutierrez, who came here as an undocumented immigrant, got his status adjusted, enlisted, like my father, in the United States Army as a legal immigrant, and in Jose's case made the ultimate sacrifice and got his citizenship posthumously. That's the face of immigrants that this president won't talk about. He only wants to fearmonger. And that's why tomorrow is so darn important, because throw that Daily Beast article in the trash can. Yep. We've got to win elections tomorrow because we've got to build a better America immediately. Our democracy is on the ballot. We have to make sure we're not only fighting for health care and quality education and the right to form a union and women's reproductive health and climate. We have to restore the institutions of our democracy. That's why this is the most important election of our lifetime. That's why I think I've slept in my own bed once in the last 3 weeks, because we're going everywhere. I'm calling you right now from Milwaukee, where I was just doing an interview with the local Spanish language television station, because we've got about 150,000 Latinos here in Wisconsin who are eligible to vote. I want to make sure they get out and vote. We have invested, not just 2 months ago, but we started investing as soon as I took over at the DNC, because we're a 50-state party. We're an every zip code party. We're taking no one for granted. We're engaging folks everywhere. And what excites me tomorrow, as much as anything, Tom, is the breadth and depth of where Democrats are competing. I mean, we've got a shot to win Kansas. We've got a shot to win South Dakota. We've got a shot in the industrial Midwest to win them all, but only if people show up and vote. That's why this is the election of a lifetime, and that's why I'm so appreciative of what you're doing. And I will observe within the Democratic ranks, there's a unity of purpose around everyone. I appreciate all the work that everyone's doing. I think Senator Sanders will be on your show. This will be the second show in a row where I have appeared right after or right before he has come on. We're going everywhere to make sure people get out and vote tomorrow, because we've got to be all in this together, and we are.
That's great. That's great. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, we now know a BBC reporter sued Brian Kemp and actually got a copy of his purge list, his almost 500,000 people who were purged, and then hired one of the nation's premier direct, and I used to be in this business. I used to own an ad agency, and I know these companies, one of the best direct mail companies in America. They literally update their list daily, and said, compare this purge list to your list of people that you'd be mailing catalogs to in Georgia right now. And they were able to confirm, and then a whole bunch of phone calls were made to double confirm, that over 300,000 people in Georgia, just in the state of Georgia, on Brian Kemp's purge list are actually still living in Georgia, have not moved, and have not died. And I'm not hearing anything about this from the Democrats. What are you going to do about these voter purges? We have 14 million people in the last 13 months who have been removed from the voting rolls in 26 states in the United States. That is more than 10% of the number of people who voted in the last election. What are we doing about this?
Oh, we're doing a lot. We've won 2 lawsuits in Georgia just in the last couple of weeks. A lawsuit in Tennessee, a lawsuit. I mean, they're going to cheat everywhere. They can't win in the marketplace of ideas, so you got to make it harder for people to vote. I was in Georgia just this weekend, and part of the reason we are doing so much outreach in African American, Latino, and Asian American communities is to make sure that people know they make a plan, because they're trying to make it harder for you to vote. And when you check ahead, for so many people, you just sort of show up and vote because you know you're going to be on the list. And that's how it should be, but that's not how it is with all of the purging that has gone on, and all of there's an array of dirty tricks. I was in Shelby County, Tennessee, which is Memphis, and they've tried to make it harder for African Americans to vote there. I sued Brian Kemp when I was heading up the Civil Rights Division. I mean, he and Chris Kobach of Texas are the chair and the co-chair of the voter suppression task force of the Republican Party, because they've been doing this for years, and I've been suing them for years. And other folks are out there suing them. And we have built a voter protection operation, not just us at the DNC, but the entire Democratic and progressive ecosystem. There's an army of lawyers down in Georgia, because that will be ground zero. We have this computer tool called LBJ, which helps us identify where are the precincts where we think there's going to be the trouble. So we know the potential trouble spots. We've got people on the ground there. That's why all hands need to be on deck. Vote, and then help people secure the vote. That's what folks on this station need to do, because our democracy is on the line tomorrow.
Amen. Tom Perez, chair of the DNC. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure.
Democrats.org, by the way.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
You can visit the website, Democrats.org, and you can tweet Tom at Tom Perez. We'll be back with Bernie Sanders. And welcome back. Paul in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today? Paul, watching us on YouTube in Columbus, Ohio? Paul, you got to listen to your phone, not your computer or TV or whatever. Sandra in Newburgh, Oregon, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Sandra, what's up?
I am worried about the lame duck, and either you or maybe Bernie would know, is there anything that can be done to keep the Republicans from going crazy, especially if we win the House, and in this 6-week period they'll have, to prevent them from defunding or gutting Obamacare and starting to defund Medicare and Medicaid?
Wow. I mean, get out and vote.
No, I know, but we'll vote, but they'll have a 6-week period there called the lame duck.
Oh, yeah, during the lame.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah. First of all, ultimately, I mean, this might be after 2020, but anything that's done can be undone. So, as Bernie always says, despair is not an option. And by the way, he will be with us in 2 minutes and 20 seconds when we rejoin our commercial stations. Beyond that, I think, what is the old saying? The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. We just need to, we need to be super aware of what's going on. We need to keep our eyes open. We need to be aggressive. We need to get out there. So, Sandra, that seems to me like the best way to do it. Thanks a lot for the call. Donovan in Templeton, California, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Donovan, what's up?
Well, Tom, I just wanted to call and thank you for your good work. And I just wanted to suggest one main thing that's always been on my mind for a long time is why don't we have a confidence vote during these midterm examinations, or ballots, or elections, or what do you call them? Because they give the public a chance to, we all get out and put a little X on yes or no on this administration we have, and we'll just call it a confidence vote after 2 years of what we've been putting up with.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say, and I want to thank you for listening to me.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Donovan. Essentially, the vote is a vote of confidence or no confidence, and our Constitution doesn't provide for no confidence votes like many parliamentary systems do, and that's why that's not happening. Peggy in Lake City, Iowa. Hey, Peggy, what's up? Got a minute to Bernie.
Hey. Yeah, I've got a little, by the way, Bernie rode in my car in a parade, after a parade in Dennis.
Oh, that must have been a thrill.
Yeah, it was. Anyway, I'm calling because I am so amazed. Where I live, it's a small town, 1,700 people in northwest central Iowa, between Des Moines and Sioux City. Anyway, the majority of the people are independents, and then it's Republicans, and then it's Democrats. And we've been trying to get Steve King out for 4 years. By the way, I am a recovered Republican.
Bless you.
And I even got my folks to not vote for Trump, and they are diehard Republicans. But now my dad can't vote. Anyway, I digress. I am so amazed. I used to have a hard time putting like 12-yard signs in town, on the highway and so forth. And now they're everywhere. Democrat yard signs are more prevalent than Republicans. And
that's great. In Iowa. That's great.
In Iowa. I mean, in Steve King land.
Oh, really? Well, that must be why he's finally decided to run a TV ad. He's just been relying on, raw racism up to this point. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Peggy, I got to run. We got Bernie Sanders is up next. So thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour, and we will be right back with Senator Bernie Sanders. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us, our old buddy, Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, welcome back. Bernie? No Bernie. Okay, well, I don't know what happened. He seems to have vanished. Yeah, I don't know. Anyhow, I'm going to put this on hold. Shira, can you pop up line 10 and yell at me when Bernie pops in? He might be on another phone line with somebody else. Thank you very much. George in Chicago. Hey, George, what's on your mind?
You and Greg Palast and others have done a great job educating us on all the horrible
Bernie's
things.
there? Hey, George, hang on just a minute. No, Shira says he's not there. Yeah. Okay, George, go ahead.
Anyway, you and Greg Palast and other guests of yours have done yeoman work.
Maybe his phone is muted? I'm sorry, George. I'm multitasking here. Good.
Hey, Tom, it's live radio.
Yeah, I know. There you go. We just lost Bernie. He just dropped off the board. Oh, they're going to call back in. Okay. So, George, you were saying, and let's do this real quick because when Bernie comes on,
all the ways complex and fair and foul that the Republicans use to screw with the voting systems. I went to my early voting center to vote on Friday, and I noticed all the machines were touch screens. And I said to the judge, I don't vote on those things because I don't trust them. I want my vote to count. And she said, okay, you can just vote in your precinct on Tuesday. There will be plenty of Optiscans that you can fill out your own ballot on. While we were talking, a woman at one of the machines called out loudly, help, help, my machine malfunctioned. It turned out that the tape that recorded the votes had run out in her middle of her voting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought to myself, well, what does this mean? Does that mean her ballot is spoiled because it's going to be half on one tape and half on another? Or do they cut off a piece and tape it to another one? And is that open to question from challengers? And it's like something this simple and mundane can mess up the voting system. And then I remember that you told us that the cash register tapes we get now are not printed in ink; they're heat activated.
Right.
And I don't know if these machines print in ink or it's heat activation. And the other trouble with those receipts, besides being possibly cancer-causing, is that the ink fades over time.
Right.
If you have a receipt that you're saving for some purpose, and you look at it 3 or 4 months later, it's faded to almost nothingness. So these machines have all kinds of ways they can mess up our franchise that you don't even think of.
Yeah, remarkable. George, I don't know the answer to the question, and I don't know what, it's other than just to get rid of all the voting machines and go to paper. I mean, which is, what we have all been advocating forever, and even Bernie has been advocating forever. I don't see any other option. I mean, this is just, it seems like that's the thing to do.
Yeah, well, I would suggest that because the Constitution gives the Congress the authority and the power to set the qualifications for its own members, that they pass legislation that says no votes for any senator or congressman will be accepted unless they were cast on simple, straightforward paper ballots. And the Democrats
that would not pass
the
a constitutional test. Senator Sanders is on the line, George. I got to run. Thank you for the call. Senator Sanders?
Yeah.
Hey,
how are you?
Thank you. Thank the Lord. I'm sorry we only have a couple minutes here, but how's everything going? What's up?
Good. Well, look, I will tell your listeners what you know and what everybody else knows, and that is that the election tomorrow is the most important election in our lifetime. It's not just about climate change or health care or about education. It is about having a president who is the most racist, sexist, bigoted president in the modern history of our country, and that it is terribly important that we have a large voter turnout tomorrow, that we defeat the Trump agenda and Trump acolytes, and that we start electing progressive members to the House and the Senate and the governorships all over this country.
Yeah, amen. Amen. And how are you? What are your hopes for if the Democrats take the House? What are your hopes for things going forward?
Well, let me just say this: that in the last 2 weeks, I've been to 13 states. We've done about 35 rallies and other types of meetings. Right. And in so many states, Tom, what you're looking at is elections where the polling has it, a few points one way or a few points the other way. So my major concern now is that we get that voter turnout in key states and we elected people. Now, if the Democrats are successful, if we win control over the House and, if the cookies crumble in the right way and we win control over the Senate, clearly what we've got to do is come out firing right away with a strong progressive agenda that makes sense for the working families of this country. What does that mean? Moving to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, beginning the process for Medicare for all, which the first year would mean lowering the eligibility age from 65 to 55 and covering all of the children. That's the first year of a 4-year phase-in for Medicare for all. It means taking on the drug companies and no more dilly-dallying around. We're going to lower drug prices substantially in this country because we're paying far and away the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. It means rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and creating millions of good-paying jobs. I mean, those are some of the very, very clear initiatives that we need to do, getting right out of the blocks if the Democrats control the House and the Senate.
Yeah. Not to mention the ability to have the subpoena to find out what the hell's going on inside the Trump administration.
Well, that's in addition to all of that. Yeah, that's something we're going to have to be looking at it well. But right now, my concern is a large voter turnout for Tuesday. I don't want to be presumptuous in talking about what we're going to do if we're not in a position to do that. So all I would say, let me say a word to the many young people out there. 4 years ago, we had the lowest voter turnout in modern American history. Let's not repeat that mistake. Let's get out and vote.
Amen. Senator Bernie Sanders, it's always a pleasure having you on our program, Senator. Thank you so much for dropping by today.
Thank you, Tom. Take care.
Great talking with you. Keep up the great work. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From UN headquarters.
Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you. We're reading today from William Scherer's classic History of the Third Reich, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. This is from Chapter 7, page 188, The Nazification of Germany, 1933 to 34. The theory which Hitler had evolved in his vagabond days in Vienna and never forgotten, that the way to power for a revolutionary movement was to ally itself with some of the powerful institutions in the state, had now worked out in practice pretty much as he had calculated. The president, backed by the army and the conservatives, had made him chancellor. His political power, though great, was, however, not complete. It was shared with these three sources of authority which had put him into office and which were outside and to some extent distrustful of the National Socialist movement. Hitler's immediate task, therefore, was to quickly eliminate them from the driver's seat, make his party the exclusive master of the state, and then with the power of an authoritarian government and its police, carry out the Nazi revolution. He had been in office scarcely 24 hours when he made his first decisive move, springing a trap on his gullible conservative captors and setting in motion a chain of events which he either originated or controlled, and which at the end of just 6 months would bring the complete Nazification of Germany and his own elevation to dictator of the Reich, unified and defederalized for the first time in German history. 5 hours after being sworn in at 5 p.m. on January 3rd, 1933, Hitler held his first cabinet meeting. The minutes of the session, which turned up at Nuremberg among the hundreds of tons of captured secret documents, reveal how quickly and adroitly Hitler, aided by the crafty Goering, began to take his conservative colleagues for a ride. Hindenburg had named Hitler to head not a presidential cabinet, but one based on a majority of the Reichstag, the parliament. However, the Nazis and the Nationalists, the only two parties represented in the government, had only 247 seats out of 538 in parliament, and thus lacked a majority. To attain it, they needed the backing of the Center Party with its 70 seats. In the very first hours of the new government, Hitler had dispatched Goering to talk with the centrist leaders, and now he reported to the cabinet that the center was demanding certain concessions. Goering had therefore proposed that the Reichstag be dissolved and new elections held, and Hitler agreed. Hugenberg, a man of wooden mind for all his success in business, objected to taking the center into the government, but on the other hand opposed new elections, well knowing that the Nazis, with the resources of the state behind them, might win an absolute majority at the polls and thus be in a position to dispense with his own services and those of his conservative friends. So he proposed simply suppressing the Communist Party. With its 100 seats eliminated, the Nazis and the Nationalists would have a majority. But Hitler would not go so far at that moment, and it was finally agreed that the Chancellor himself would confer with the Center Party leaders on the following morning, and if the talks were fruitless, the cabinet would then ask for new elections. Hitler easily made the talks fruitless. At his request, the Center leader, Monsignor Kaas, submitted as a basis for discussion a list of questions which added up to a demand that Hitler promised to govern constitutionally. But Hitler, tricking both Kaas and his cabinet members, reported to the latter that the Center had made impossible demands and that there was no chance of agreement. He therefore proposed that the president be asked to dissolve the Reichstag and call new elections. Hugenberg and Papen were trapped. After a solemn assurance that from the Nazi leader that the cabinet would remain unchanged, however, the elections turned out, they agreed to go along with him. New elections were set for March 5th. For the first time in the last relatively free election Germany was to have, the Nazi Party would now employ all the vast resources of the government to win votes. Goebbels was jubilant. Now it will be easy, he wrote in his diary on February 3rd, to carry on the fight, for we can call on all the resources of the state. Radio and press are at our disposal. We shall stage a masterpiece of propaganda, and this time, naturally, there is no lack of money. The big businessmen, pleased with the new government that was going to put the organized workers in their place and leave management to run its business as it wished, were asked to cough up. This they agreed to do at a meeting on February 20th at Göring's Reichstag President's Palace, at which Dr. Schott acted as host, and Göring and Hitler laid down the line to a couple of dozen of Germany's leading magnates, including Krupp, von Bohlen, who had become an enthusiastic Nazi overnight, Bosch and Schnitzler of IG Farben, and Vogler, head of the United Steelworks. The record of this secret meeting has been preserved. Hitler began a long speech with a sop to the industrialists. Private enterprise, he said, cannot be maintained in an age of democracy. It is conceivable only if the people have a sound idea of authority and personality. All the worldly goods we possess we owe to the struggle of the chosen. We must not forget that all the benefits of culture must be introduced more or less with an iron fist. He promised the businessmen that he would eliminate the Marxist and restore the Wehrmacht, the German army, which was of special interest to such industries as Krupp, United Steel, and IG Farben, which stood to gain the most from the rearmament. Now we stand before the last election, Hitler concluded, and he promised his listeners that regardless of the outcome, there will be no retreat. If he did not win, he would stay in power, quote, by other means with other weapons, end quote. Göring, talking more to the immediate point, stressed the necessity of financial sacrifices, which surely would be much easier for industry to bear if it realized that the election of March the 5th will surely be the last one for the next 10 years, probably even for the next 100 years. All this was made clear to the assembled industrialists, and they responded with enthusiasm to the promise of the end of the infernal elections, the end of democracy, the end of disarmament. The book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, by William Shearer.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and that's in the half hour. Anthony Scaramucci is going to be with us in a half hour. We're going to have an interesting conversation about all the lies that Donald Trump has told, all the promises he's broken. We'll hear the mooch try to tell us how wonderful he is and what a great blue-collar president he is. It should be interesting. We just had a fascinating conversation with Senator Sanders. He is, as he said, he's very hopeful that we can actually even take the Senate as well as the House and start passing some good progressive legislation. If we just take the House, we can still pass good progressive legislation, and the whole country will see how Trump and the Republicans, fight that, and it blows up in their face, plus, conduct investigations. We had a conversation with Tom Perez about voter suppression and what's going on. He talked about how he's twice sued Brian Kemp, and it's still going on. Brian Kemp and all his giant scam. It's just a fascinating time, and we've got a lot going on here. Rather than just going off on, I've already covered most of the substantial news of the day. Although just one other quick story here, the EPA has just disappeared the entire climate page. right? For a long time, it said this page is being updated, and here's other ways to find what you're looking for. Now they've literally taken it down. They did this October 16th, sometime between 5:12 p.m. October 16th and 3 a.m. the next morning, that morning, October 17th. And, you know, no explanation, nothing. Just, hey, the Environmental Protection Agency, which protects the environment, what's the most obvious and visible part of the environment to all of us? You know, the air we breathe, right? And they just took the climate page down. It's astonishing. Paul in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Paul. Thanks for Paul. Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I have a rather pertinent question, as I've just done early voting Saturday, but I just wanted to tell all fellow Ohioans out there, please double check, triple check your registration through the Secretary of State's website. Make sure you know your polling place. Bring your ID. And because judges don't have party affiliation listed as well, please make sure you are allowed to bring a piece of paper into the ballot box. Make sure that we put not just Democrats back in the State House, Congress, the governorship, but make sure that we have blue benches as well. And a question is, I did early voting, and it was before I heard your interview last week with Greg Palast. It is indeed true I had to fill out an absentee card before I went in to vote. The question that I have is, and it's very concerning when I heard your conversation, but it's good to hear it. How can, if indeed there's any funny business that they would ever take a look at my card and say, oh, there's a discrepancy in this voting, could I fight it or even find out? And then for future reference here in Ohio, where would be the best way or method to vote? Is it ballot at the polls, or is it absentee with a paper trail? I'll put it back over to you, and thanks again.
Paul, I don't know the rules or the laws in Ohio. I do know that Ohio is in the forefront of states in voter suppression. They took this all the way to the Supreme Court, defending their right to purge people from the voting rolls if they hadn't voted in a previous election and didn't respond to a postcard, which used to be called caging, and for 30 years there was a court order preventing the Republican Party from doing it. That all got blown up by the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court also said to the state of Ohio, it's just fine if you purge people from the voting rolls because they didn't vote in the last election. And so now you've got more than a dozen other states that are aggressively doing this, all Republican-controlled states. The danger of an absentee ballot, as you point out, as Greg talked about on the show the other day, is that with an absentee ballot, if your name is Paul Quincy Johnson and you normally sign your driver's license Paul Q Johnson, but when you signed your voter registration, you signed it Paul Quincy Johnson, and you go to vote, and they say, here's fill out your the absentee ballot. You've got to redo your signature, which you don't have to do when you vote normally, And if you put the Q instead of the Quincy, or Q period instead of just a Q, or Q instead of Q period, if it's not exactly the same, then at least this is what Brian Kemp is doing in Georgia. There's no reason to believe that they're not doing it in Ohio and other Republican-controlled states. Then they challenge your vote. In most states, you can find out on the day of the election or the day after the election if your vote was counted, or if it was challenged, and then you can challenge the challenge. Although at that point, it's kind of water under the bridge. When John Kerry conceded Ohio, which is what gave the election to George Bush in 2004, it was that tight. It was that close. When John Kerry conceded Ohio, he had, quote, lost, end quote, by, as I recall, around 120,000 votes. And as I recall, there were about 160,000 absentee ballots and provisional ballots that had not yet been opened or counted. Maybe not the absentees, the provisionals certainly. But the reality is that, as long as we have this voter registration system, which is absurd, we need a national voter ID of some sort. I think that a Medicare for All program could provide that. And if everybody has a Medicare card, which doubles as a national voter ID, I just double-checked the Canadian website for voting, and they list literally at the top of the list of all the IDs that you can use in Canada to vote is your Medicare card. Right? You're being enrolled in the Canadian healthcare system. So you do need two kinds of ID now to vote in Canada. And apparently in some provinces, the ID card doesn't have your picture on it, and others it does. But, you know, we could do this here in the United States and make the Medicare ID card, if we do Medicare for all, which is what Bernie's talking about, if we do Medicare for all, we could make that card look like a driver's license, make it that tight, that close, a good ID, and get the message out. So, you know, there's a lot that can be done with this, and that would be where I would start. Rob in Guys Mills, Pennsylvania. Guys Mills, both plural, Pennsylvania. Hey, Rob, what's up?
Yeah.
Or I guess possessive and plural, right?
What's that?
I guess it's possessive and plural, Guys Mills.
Mills, yeah. I was just talking about the blue unity, how important it is, because these people have a well-oiled corruption machine, so don't be fooled by polls and all that. Get out there. What I'd like to do, this is Rob Sandera, by the way, I'd like to see the vote carry a serial number, and the serial number be verifiable in the database at any time by the person that placed that vote. I think we have to use a little bit of alternative system than just the Social Security number, because you're putting that at risk of being stolen. But that would be my idea, that people would be able to probably either go on the internet, call from a cell phone, or even a regular phone. We have databases all over the place for these insurance companies. We don't have nothing for voting, and the problem has gotten too far.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, you know, somehow we've all managed to get Social Security cards and Social Security numbers. I think using a Social Security number instead of your name to vote might be a useful way to prevent the kind of purging that Brian Kemp is doing and that Chris Kobach has been doing for years and years based on your name. Oh, there's a felon in Texas who's got a similar name. And by the way, it's a common name in the African-American community. You know, what a coincidence. So, you know, I'm not sure that, and in fact, if somebody had stolen your Social Security number, for example, somebody who was in the country without documentation was using it to work, this would be a way of having that pop up right away, which I think would strengthen a check your Social Security number program to make sure that people who are working here actually are legal to work here. So it could be a twofer. But yeah, we need to clean this up and simplify it. It's been made complicated. This all started after Jim Crow. There had been voter registration in some states prior to that, but that's when pretty much it went national, and in the 1870s. And it was to keep black people from voting in the South and to keep poor people, white people, from voting in the North. It was just that simple. And, you know, North Dakota has no voter registration system. They don't need one. The rest of us don't need one, frankly. If you show up and your current ID shows you as a resident of the state or the county or wherever you're voting, and your utility bill or whatever shows that you actually do live there, you should be allowed to vote. It's just that simple. And your ID demonstrates your citizenship, and within 2 years, everybody in the country on the driver's licenses is going to have this so-called real ID, so that you can use it in airports and things, with a little star and all that on it. Why can't we do the same thing with a Medicare for All card? And because that'll be more universal than a driver's license. Older people who can't drive anymore don't have driver's licenses. A lot of students who just went to college and they've never owned a car before, and they're living on campus. They don't need a car. They don't have driver's licenses. You've got, poor people who can't afford a car don't have driver's licenses. People who live in cities, which tend to be heavily Democratic and use a lot of public transportation, don't have a driver's license. One of my best friends grew up in New York City. He's my age. I don't know if he has a driver's license now, but I know that in all the years I've known him, which is literally since 1978 or 79, he only had a car once, and that was for 2 years. I mean, it was like, and then it turned into like, why do I have a car in New York City? It costs almost as much to park it as it does to rent my apartment. This is nuts. Lots and lots of people in big cities just they don't bother to get their driver's licenses renewed, unless they travel a lot. Because it doubles as an ID. So why not use a national health care system card as a national ID card? Because older people will get it, students will get it, younger people will get it, everybody will get it. And it shows your age, it shows that you're a citizen, and and it's also it's the card that you use when you go into the doctor's office or the hospital. I mean, it's just very, very simple. Straightforward stuff. Arthur in San Miguel, California. Hey, Arthur, what's up?
Yeah, I'm formerly homeless, but I vote every chance I get. I vote by mail, by the way. In California, it seems, I'm not too sure about it, but it seems that you can vote by, you get to vote by mail all the time. And when I changed addresses from my home where I was homeless to an address that I'm living in now, Section 8 housing, and I registered to vote because I moved from Cambria to San Miguel, and I had to re-register. And as soon as I got my my card and everything, I was eligible to vote by mail, and I got my mail card in, and I voted the same day I got the card, my ballot.
Good on you, Arthur. You know, we need, just like we need postal banking, I think that we need to go back to the GPO, the General Post Office thing for homeless people, where they can easily use the post office as their address without having to pay for a box. Arthur, thank you for the call.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 18 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Elizabeth in Ashland, Oregon. Hey, Elizabeth, what's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is the way we vote. Here in Oregon, I love the way we vote. I've lived in other states. But Oregon citizens receive a booklet well before voting day, and in it we can study the pros and cons of the issues and the bios of the candidates. And then included is information on who is supporting both the issues and the candidates. And I much prefer this system to any other state. No scandal that I know of has ever been associated with this system. And Washington State and Colorado, I believe, also vote by mail. In Oregon, we keep it simple.
Yeah, in Colorado, I think it's an option. But in Washington State, there's no option to directly vote any longer. They've completely emulated Oregon. Yeah. Or am I wrong about Colorado?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I thought that we were the only two states that had nothing but vote by mail. I know a number of other states, like in some states, you have to, like in Virginia, if you want to get an absentee ballot, if you want to vote by mail, you have to swear that you're disabled or that you're going to be out of the state, or you have to give a reason, and you can be prosecuted if you lie about the reason. And an acceptable reason does not include I want to vote from home. So, I mean, you've got, that extreme in an old Confederate state versus, Oregon and Washington State saying, yeah, vote by mail. Yeah, I love it, Elizabeth. I got that voter thing, and there's a bunch of propositions, ballot measures on the ballot here this year. And I'd seen the ads on TV, but I didn't really know what to believe. And just reading the voter pamphlet where they had all these organizations saying, here's why you should vote for this, and then here's why you should vote against it. And they made their arguments in tight, concise, they were limited to a certain number of words, tight, concise fashion. You find out where it came from, who originated it. You get the background on the candidates, absolutely. I mean, the voter book in Oregon this year was, it was a half-inch thick. I mean, it was a publication. So, yeah, spot on, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
Yeah, but in the voter booklet, you could identify your community, and
yes,
it was very easy to use.
Yeah, absolutely, and I loved it. Louise and I sat down and did it last weekend, the weekend before last, before this last weekend. Amen. Elizabeth, thank you for the call. Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
How's it going?
Good.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So I know you've talked a lot about, you also met with Bernie Sanders, right? So a big issue has been, especially in West Virginia with, I know it's a little bit off topic, but have you heard of this guy named Richard Ojeda?
No.
He's, done a lot of what you wanted, put forth populist left economics to, sway the voters in his favor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
what's he running for?
That can actually, make the House or even possibly the Senate go for the Democrats.
What's he running for?
You think so?
I said, what is he running for?
He's running for the Senate. I think it's the Senator of West Virginia. He's going to run for that. Uh-huh. He's running for that.
Oh, you mean against Joe Manchin?
No, he's a Democrat.
But Joe Manchin, Joe Manchin's the
Manchin is
Democrat
not running.
running in West Virginia. Oh, you mean state Senate?
Yes.
I get it. Yeah, there's some great state Senate and state House and state Assembly, it varies from state to state, candidates all around the United States. And after the election, I want to start getting more and more of them on just to feature what's going on, who are the good progressives out here, and what are they doing. It's 23 minutes past the hour. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Anthony in Southgate, California. Hey, Anthony, what's up?
Oh, hello. Wait, am I on?
You are. You're on the air.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. This is my first time calling in. I've been watching you actually kind of since I was a kid. I'm 26 years old.
Wow. Well, thank you, Anthony.
Yeah. I have a few questions. How many, I guess, what we would call progressive people are running for, Congress? And going to sort of probably the question that we all want to know is, what is their national platform? Because $15 an hour, that's good and all, but why wouldn't it? Like I've seen Chris Hedges say that if the minimum wage matched productivity and I guess inflation, it would be well over $20. Like, why don't we just say, okay, we'll just make it over $20?
Yeah.
And then
well, you go step by step, but I agree. If the minimum wage was simply inflation adjusted since 1968, it would be $22.40 an hour. If it was productivity adjusted, it would be closer to $40 an hour.
Wow.
Because productivity has increased largely because of computers and robots and AI. And so your productivity per worker, which is basically the profit that companies make off your labor, has gone up substantially. But, inflation adjusted back in the day, my dad working in a tool and die shop was making $40 an hour or something in that neighborhood. I mean, maybe 30, but, it was certainly not just 20. And so, this is, this is something that I think, so anyhow, you asked two questions. How many progressives are running and what's their agenda going to be? I believe that something close to the majority of Democrats who are running for election or running for re-election in the U.S. House are progressives or members of the Progressive Caucus. The Progressive Caucus has just short of 100 members. There's a little over 200 Democrats in the House of Representatives, but there's a whole bunch of Democrats who are running right now for open seats or Republican-controlled seats who are running on very progressive platforms. So it may be that after this election, progressives are actually going to be the majority in the Democratic Party in the House. In the Senate, it's not quite there. It's closer to probably 50-50. You've got the corporate Democrats, the Claire McCaskills and Joe Manchins, but they caucus with the progressives and they tend to vote for progressive issues. It tends to be more on the local, the hometown stuff, Joe Manchin and Cole, for example, in West Virginia, where they go against the progressives, but, not in a terrible way. So, I see all this as just insanely good news, Anthony, and I think that within 2 years, you're going to see the Democratic Party be solidly the progressive party. I think the days of triangulation and third way are dead. They're dying right now, but they will soon be dead. Anthony, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're going to be back with Anthony Scaramucci. Oh, this is going to get weird right after this. Our book today is From Slave Ship to Supermax, Mass Incarceration, Prisoner Abuse, and the New Neo-Slave Model by Patrick Elliott Alexander. This is Chapter 1. Talking in George Jackson's Shadow is the title, if Beale Street could talk. Prison preoccupied the literary imagination of James Baldwin. Yet his biographer David Leeming is one of the few to notice that prisons and prisoners were a significant part of Baldwin's own personal experience. Even the most cursory glance at Baldwin's published works and interviews bear out Leeming's important observation. In his essay Equal in Paris, 1955, Baldwin reveals that during his time in France, he was, quote, arrested as a receiver of stolen goods and spent 8 days in prison. While confined, Baldwin witnessed with great shock another incarcerated man's bleeding and wounding go unattended intentionally by prison staff. In his longer essay, No Name on the Street, 1972, Baldwin reflects on frequent prison visits that he made to his friend Tony Maynard, a black man who suffered violent treatment from guards after he was falsely accused with the murder of a white U.S. Marine. Baldwin's advocacy for black political prisoners in particular deeply informed his writings and public addresses throughout the 1970s and included actions such as aiding in the release of imprisoned Black Panther Party co-founders Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. In 1970, Baldwin was so outraged by the appearance of Angela Davis, the black revolutionary and advocate for political prisoners in handcuffs and mock mugshot posture on the cover of Newsweek magazine, that he published an open letter to the New York Review of Books in which he deemed her jailing a continuation of slavery and a foreshadowing of a radicalized epidemic of mass incarceration at one and at the same time. Quote, only a handful of the millions of people in this vast place are unaware that the fate intended for you, Sister Angela, and for the numberless prisoners in our concentration camps, for that is what they are, is a fate which is about to engulf them too, end quote. When Baldwin spoke out about racism in the criminal justice system in the Dick Cavett Show in 1973, he won widespread admiration among imprisoned black communities, receiving, quote, so many letters from them that he determined to arrange a Christmas version of his musical drama, The Hallelujah Chorus, that would tour American prisons. Finally, in 1982, Baldwin published a letter in which he insisted that artists and prisoners have more in common with one another than have servants of the state. Baldwin was a stranger neither to witnessing nor to writing about prisons and prisoner abuse. Yet Baldwin's oeuvre had not been examined extensively in the context of his engagements with the literature and life experiences of imprisoned men and women. This chapter focuses on Baldwin's understanding of prisoner abuse and police intimidation as interrelated, radicalized social control functions of the contemporary U.S. carceral state, and pays careful attention to how his historicizing of radicalized state violence in fiction is shaped by his admiring engagement with the writings of imprisoned intellectuals. Baldwin, I contend, alludes to the human chattel conditioning, disciplinary violence, and economic exploitation that typified the institution of slavery in his Black Liberation Movement era short stories and novels to situate his black working class characters' subjection to racial profiling, police brutality, wrongful incarceration, indefinite solitary confinement, prisoner abuse, and premature death in racialized historical context. Focusing mostly on Baldwin's novel If Beale Street Could Talk, 1974, this chapter explores how Baldwin, inspired by the narrative techniques of the imprisoned intellectual George Jackson, links a repressive logic of racial terror from the era of antebellum slavery with the state's practice of white supremacist social control into the contemporary criminal justice system. I argue that by incorporating Baldwin's conception of neo-slavery into the elusive framework for Beale Street, Baldwin elucidates the predictability rather than the aberrant nature of black men's hypercriminalization, incarceration, and brutalization by the state. Beale Street thus exemplifies well what I theorized in the introduction as a neo-abolitionist novel. With this work, Baldwin becomes the first canonical African-American writer to construct a conceptual model of the prison-industrial complex in fiction that privileges the narrative viewpoint of its captives while also making apparent slavery's vestiges in the contemporary U.S. criminal justice system. My point of departure for this chapter is Baldwin's career-length consideration of racial terror as a state-sanctioned social control function of both pre- and post-slavery American life, and the relationship of this instrumentalist terror to blacks' recurring encounters with state violence in the late 20th and 21st centuries. This contextualization establishes a broader framework within which my reading of criminalization and punishment in Beale Street might be understood. Baldwin's witnessing of the physical, psychological, and spiritual harm that the criminalized black body endures at the hands of the state shows up prominently in his nonfiction works as well. In his book-length essay, No Name in the Street, for instance, Baldwin's assessment of wounds that prison guards inflict on his former driver and bodyguard, Tony Maynard, a wrongfully incarcerated black man, is characteristically disturbing and damning. The book, From Slave Ship to Supermax.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Your support program, of course. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you. Hartmann here with you. Welcome back. Excuse me. And Lisa in North Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Lisa, what's on your mind today?
Hi.
Lisa, if I may interrupt you, I had advertised that Scaramucci was going to be with us, and we called his people to say, okay, you know, he's scheduled for right now, and they're like, well, I can't find him. I don't know where he is. So I don't know if he's hiding from us or if he's just like, you know, not competent at responding to keeping his appointments. So anyhow, it's yours, yeah. Lisa, listening on 92.5 FM. What's up?
Well, I just wanted to call because I'm actually probably one of the youngest callers you've gotten. I'm 19, and I'm in college, right? I actually am in between classes, but it's just, I think it's very important that people my age, especially, I live in North Aurora, but it's so close to Aurora, and I see so many people struggling that are my age, and it just breaks my heart. And just the fact that Republicans are trying to make it so much harder, especially for a lot of my friends, is just so frustrating. And I'm always talking about to my friends, I'm always trying to get them, if they're able to vote. Yeah. Because ever since fourth grade, I've always known it was a big deal back when it was Obama versus McCain. And my mom is she's actually like on the tail end of the baby boomers. But she's super liberal and listens to you guys every day. And so it's just, I wish more people my age would get into politics because it's our future.
I agree. I agree. Please tell your mom hi for me, Lisa. And you know, if you look back in 2005, George W. Bush and Mitch McConnell pushed through this so-called Bankruptcy Improvement Act or something like that, you know, bankruptcy update. And they explicitly wrote into the bankruptcy law. Now, it used to be that you could declare bankruptcy on pretty much anything except your taxes. You know, if you owed money on and you couldn't pay your home mortgage, you could declare bankruptcy. If you couldn't pay your credit cards, you could declare bankruptcy. And you basically, the slate was wiped clean and you could start over again. Although, you know, it hurt your credit rating, but still, you could start over again. You didn't owe the money anymore. Nobody was going to harass you for the rest of your life. They wrote into the bankruptcy bill that just like with taxes, you cannot discharge student debt through bankruptcy, which in my opinion was criminal. And as soon as that was done, all these for-profit colleges just started bursting at the seams, and all these companies started coming out saying, oh, we'd love to loan money to students, because it's absolutely risk-free. They know that, you know, the law will back them up on harassing people forever, and thus the cost of college has exploded. You've got over $1.25 trillion worth of college loans out there. You know, not to sound too much like an old fart here, Lisa, but when I went to college in 1960, whatever the year was, 67, I guess it was when I first went to college, I didn't even know anybody who had student debt. I mean, it was like, you know, in the second year that I discovered that a friend of mine who was working on his master's degree had to take out a loan to get his master's degree. And I thought, wow, that's so sad. You know, I put myself through, and I didn't graduate, but you know, to the extent that I went to college, I paid for it pumping gas and working as a dishwasher at Bob's Big Boy in the summer. I mean, you know, you could do that back then. And it's just nuts how the Republicans have made it so difficult for young people to even, you know, get a toehold in this economy. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky because my parents are in the small middle class, and so they're helping me through college. Yeah. But I also have a job, and I'm going to a community college right now to just save some money because it's just the cost is just crazy, and without my parents' help, I don't think I'd be able to get through college.
Yeah, and that should not be. I mean, that's the kind of legacy student thing, you know, the way that so many people actually get into the good college because their parents went there and they've got a lot of money, and it just like that should not be what determines who goes to college. And this new strategy that people have evolved of 2 years of junior college and then transfer to a school so that you don't have 4 years of massive student debt but only 2. Even that's crazy. I mean, it's like it has been so distorted by the Republican behavior on this. It's just incredible. Lisa, thank you for the call. Yeah. And thanks so much for listening to us there in Illinois on 92.5 FM. So it seems like it's been 2 minutes. I don't know. Is the Mooch on the line? Apparently not. Okay, sure. You're going to sit on line 10 and let me know when he shows up, right? Steve in Blacksburg, Virginia. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I've been loving how you've been talking about the voter suppression and voter purges and everything, and it upsets me to no end. And I really hope that if the Democrats actually do take control of the House of Representatives, that they try to push through a bill that declares voter suppression voter fraud.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so worried about 5 or 6 people that may commit voter fraud every year, and yet this voter suppression is stealing millions of votes.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
If these guys like Kobach and Kemp were actually facing prison sentences for all their suppression, maybe they'd quit doing it.
Well, and the 1993 Voter Registration Act comes right out and says, as part of the law, that voting is a right in the United States, not a privilege. Kemp and Kobach obviously are treating it as a privilege, not a right. And in my opinion, if this thing could get to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court were to rule that, yes, in fact, voting is a right in the United States. Now, I'm not holding my breath on that, given how, 5-4, the Republicans on the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County, the Shelby County case, Shelby County v. Holder, and how they ignored the Constitution in Bush v. Gore and said, if the votes are actually counted in Florida, it will cause, quote, irreparable harm to complainant George W. Bush.
The Bush.
Yeah. So I'm not hold my breath, but that's a strategy short of amending the Constitution. But unfortunately, when you've got a right-wing Supreme Court, basically the only way you can get around these kind of things is by amending the Constitution. So, anyhow.
Well, keep preaching, buddy.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks a lot, Steve. Okay, on the line with us is Anthony Scaramucci, the Mooch, who has, it's been 11 Scaramucci's, according to Nate, our video producer here. 12? 46? 46 Scaramucci's since he was the press secretary, and in the White House. His new book is Trump, the Blue Collar President. TrumpBlueCollarPresident.com is the website. You can tweet him at Scaramucci. Anthony Scaramucci, welcome to the program.
I'm wishing your producer a great mooch for his Christmas holiday. May he get 11 days off from your show, okay?
There you go, okay.
How are you?
I'm well.
Happy Monday, right?
Yeah.
Nothing like being blown from the White House and now an official time unit at the Naval Observatory, right?
There you go. There you go. Right? So I'm sorry we got you on a little bit late here, so we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm wondering, Trump said he was going to cut our taxes, middle-class taxes, but 53% of Americans, that's the bottom 53, actually saw their taxes go up as a result of this scam that gave the richest 1% 83% of the tax cut. He promised us that the average family would see $4,000 as a pay raise because of the tax law. In fact, wages have gone down since the tax law overall. I realize hourly wages have gone down. I realize salaried people have gone up 3%. He promised that he was going to close the special interest loopholes and specifically said carried interest, which is how people like him get insanely rich. No, they kept that loophole. He promised he was going to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something beautiful. Insurance for everybody, less expensive. Instead, he put forward a plan that would knock 24 million Americans off health insurance. How can you guys run this scam and think that anybody's going to believe you?
Okay, well, it's great to be on the show. Good afternoon. You're actually like the opposite of Sean Hannity, and I'm impressed that you know all the statistics. So,
well, I've got another 14 things here I could go through, but I wanted to give you time to talk.
Yeah,
go for it.
And I appreciate that. And so I'm not going to be able to delayer that by going one at a time. But I think one of the things that hurt the president was the SALT deduction, because that really did pop a lot of the more populous states that are blue. So their income taxes actually went up as a result of no longer getting the state and local tax deduction. Again, not defending it. I just think it's important to explain it to people what happened. The second piece of this thing.
Anthony, we're hitting a hard break here. I'd forgotten we had a hard break at 45. Can we book you again if you would, if you don't mind actually having this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sean will get in touch with your people and we'll work it out. I have to take this break here.
I just got trapped in an elevator.
No, it's all good. I understand those things happen, but I look forward to actually having a good conversation with you. Thanks so much.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
Then we made all the names.
And welcome back. Let's see here. Todd in Rockford, Illinois. Hey, Todd, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, I served in the U.S. military when I was stationed overseas. And one of the things that we were required to have when we lived in this particular country was we had to register with our passports with the government to say, we're authorized to be here. You've issued us a visa. Here's a citizen population card.
Right.
Okay. Now, when we're in the States, I recently applied for and got back a U.S. passport.
Mm-hmm.
With that passport, you also get an ID. That's good for if you lose your driver's license.
Oh, you're talking about the passport card that they've got now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And you know what? The excuse that we can't get to the driver's license bureau to get an ID, we can't do this, we can't do that. People are responsible for their own actions. Mm-hmm. You go to the post office, you mail presents to your kids. You pick up your package from Amazon. Why can't you apply for a passport at that particular time?
Well, I think about 5% of Americans have passports, and you got to jump through a lot of hoops to get a passport. And it's expensive too. You know, it's like $120 or something, as I recall, to get the new 10-year passports.
It's a 10-year passport, and you only have to have your ID card, your birth certificate, and your Social Security card.
Okay.
You have to have 2 forms of ID.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. That's
it.
Right, and you can go to the post office and apply for it. But you know, again, I don't think that most people see if we're saying that you have to have some sort of a national ID in order to vote, and you're never going to leave the country. You have no plans to leave the country. Only 3% of Americans travel internationally in any given year. So, you know, it's a very, very small minority of Americans who travel internationally. And the majority of that, by the way, is to Canada and Mexico. And
I agree.
And only recently have they begun to require passports because we started doing that. But my point is that if you had instead something that 100% of American citizens want, which is health care. They want to have their drugs paid for. They want their doctor paid for. If they get in an accident or they get sick and they go to the hospital, they want that paid for. If you had something that 100% of Americans want rather than just 3% of Americans want, even if there was a small cost associated with it, but there wouldn't be. I mean, in Canada, the Medicare cards, I'm pretty sure, are free. And they look like, at least in most provinces, they look like driver's licenses. I just double-checked the Canadian healthcare page, and sure enough, there it was. So why not, instead of trying to get people to get passports, which is like, here, you have to jump through all these hoops just to vote. Why not say, okay, you're going to have to jump through some hoops to make sure that you always have health insurance. But we all do that anyway, right? Just to get our health insurance, you got to fill out these forms, and you got to submit your medical history, and you got to tell them what your pre-existing conditions are, and all this other BS that the insurance companies do so that they can screw us. Instead, if we had a national health care system, just get the ID card, and then you can also use that to vote. What's wrong with that?
Sure, and provide proof of citizenship. Provide your Social Security number. Absolutely, let's do this.
Because that's what you have to do in Canada to get your Social Security card. Todd, thanks a lot for the call. I appreciate it. We'll be back. Bob Ney with Talk Media News is going to check in with us. He's got all the news of the day, so stick around. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. On the line with us, by the way, this report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do. Ellen Ratner's new book. On the line with us is former Congressman Bob Ney, author of Sideswiped. Bob, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Tom.
So in addition to the news of the day, I'm curious if we could just start with your thoughts as a former member of the House of Representatives representing Ohio. What do you think? How do you think this is all going to play out? And if the Democrats take the House but fail to take the Senate, how are the politics of that going to play out over the next 2 years? I mean, obviously, Trump will turn the Democrats into his punching bag. Will he succeed?
Well, Trump, great questions. First of all, Trump will triangulate anybody. He'll triangulate.
What does triangulate mean? I remember that from the Clinton era, and I understood it once. I don't remember.
Right. Well, we use it all the time because I was in the Congress, the Gingrich Congress, and triangulation, and Bill Clinton was very good at it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but Clinton would pick and choose certain battles. Sometimes he would go with the House, sometimes he would go against the House, and sometimes he would actually go around his own party. In particular on some issues, and that's what we call triangulation.
Oh, so it's just a fancy word for political maneuvering that is independent of commitment to issues, but rather, manipulation via the political system.
Correct. Triangulation, and Trump already triangulates anyone he gets mad at, so he'll do that. But you've asked a great question because I've been making some predictions today, and I've got the Senate staying Republican. And it would be 53-47, but if I'm wrong about Arizona, then it'd be 52-48.
Right.
But either way, and it's close. All right. Now the House I've got going Democratic, and I'm a little bit closer than some of my colleagues. We kind of did an internal, bet today, sort of non-monetary bet. But I'm at 228 control of the House, Democratic members, and 207. Republican members. Most people are higher than that, but that's about where I'm at on this.
So that's such a slim margin. That's what, a 4-vote margin, a 6-vote margin, something like that?
Well, they need 218 votes
218.
to pass a bill. So
it's an 8-vote
I gave
margin.
a 10-vote margin.
10-vote margin. Okay. So, on any issue of consequence, if single-payer health care, for example, there have to be at least 10 Democrats in the House of Representatives right now who are owned by the insurance companies. Fossil fuel companies have to own at least 10 Democrats. I mean, it's, only about half the Democrats are members of the Progressive Caucus. And you've got a few Democrats who are just like full out, dyed-in-the-wool, third way, kind of Bill Clinton Democrats. And that concerns me. Do you think that as a Democrat I should be concerned?
Well, yes, because look, if I'm wrong and it goes to, let's say, 238, all right, well then that's a more comfortable margin.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic too. You're still going to have a certain amount of people that will play a game or go off the base for a different reason, right? But still, obviously, 238 is going to be a much better number than my 228, and. But I was looking at the races, one by one. I could be wrong. I mean, it could be. I almost was at 235. So, I took a second look at the races. But here's the point, though, I think, to answer your question, which is the most valuable question, whether it's 238, 228, or 248. If the Democratic side is smart, they'll have a twofold plan. One, they cannot ignore the Trump administration or cabinet members that do things, so therefore they have subpoena power. All right?
Right. So expose the corruption, in other words.
Correct. And if they, for example, how many cabinet members should have been drug in anyway, under this Congress if they were doing their job because of the problems with these cabinet members. So the Democratic side can take that path and should. Republicans did it, The second path, though, I think they have to, I'm not going to say lockstep, force, but they have to come to a consensus and know where their votes are. I argue it's going to be hairy because there's going to be gun-shy Republicans because they lost, and the Democratic side might be able to craft some things where they peel off, let's say. There's not many moderates, if I understand that, but they peel off, possibly 6, 7, or 10 votes for some issues out there.
Like gun control, for example, seems like it would be high up on that list.
Pre-existing conditions. I mean, we can go down a scenario. Medicare for all, which the Republicans are terrified of, believe me. Terrified of. So I think there's opportunity if they have the game plan together. Now, the first problem they're going to have to solve is, the speakership. That's going to be an internal battle, whether, they're going to go with Nancy Pelosi or not. Now, I know they don't decide that today, but they may have to make that decision because they obviously want a smooth transition. And if she doesn't have the votes, then they're going to go with, somebody else. But I think they can't be afraid to have an agenda.
Yeah, amen. I just checked the Canadian voting website, and the number one kind of ID that people use to vote in Canada, or the top of the list of recommended ID, was your Medicare card. Apparently, in most provinces in Canada, your Medicare card has your picture on it, and it's a legal ID. You can use it to buy liquor, you can use it to get on an airplane, and you can use it to vote. Is that why the Republicans are so afraid of national Medicare program for the U.S.?
Well, I think that's part of it. And, look what Brian Kemp is doing in Georgia. Even if you had an ID, you're in trouble. If your address says North Lane Avenue, but your DMV says Lane Avenue North, he can fool you. He's
Right, or N period Lane
100.
Avenue. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, this is just, these are all vestiges. This all came out of Reconstruction, you know, or the death of Reconstruction. You were going to say something, Bob?
Oh, yeah, voter suppression.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Bob Ney, thanks so much, Bob.
Thank you.
Good talking with you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back by Thom Hartmann. This is from the introduction titled The Battle to Save Democracy. Excuse me. On September 2nd, 2009, the transnational pharmaceutical giant Pfizer pled guilty to multiple criminal felonies. It had been marketing drugs in a way that may well have led to the deaths of people, and that definitely led physicians to prescribe and patients to use pharmaceuticals in a way that for which they were not intended. Because Pfizer is a corporation, a legal abstraction, really, it couldn't go to jail like fraudster Bernie Madoff or killer John Dillinger. Instead, it paid a $1.2 billion criminal fine to the U.S. government, the biggest in history, as well as an additional $1 billion in civil penalties. The total settlement was more than $2.3 billion, another record. None of Pfizer's executives, decision makers, stockholders, owners, or employees saw even 5 minutes of the inside of a police station or a jail. Most Americans don't even know about this huge and massive crime, nor do they know that the criminal never spent a day in jail. But they do know that in the autumn of 2004, Martha Stewart was convicted of lying to investigators about her sale of stock in another pharmaceutical company. Her crime cost nobody their life, but she famously was escorted off to a women's prison. Had she been a corporation instead of a human being, odds are there would not have even been an investigation. Yet over the past century, and particularly the past 40 years, corporations have repeatedly asserted that they are, in fact, persons, and therefore eligible for the human rights protections of the Bill of Rights. In 2009, the right-wing advocacy group Citizens United argued before the Supreme Court that they had the First Amendment right to free speech and to influence elections through the production and distribution of a slasher documentary designed to destroy Hillary Clinton's ability to win the Democratic nomination. Some political observers assert that they did this in part because they believed that a black man whose first name sounded like Osama and whose middle name was Hussein could never, ever possibly win against a Republican, no matter how poor a candidate they put up. In that, they were following on a 2003 case before the Supreme Court in which Nike claimed it had the First Amendment right to lie in its corporate marketing, a variation of the First Amendment right of free speech. Corporations haven't limited their grasp to the First Amendment. Pretty much any and virtually every amendment that could be used to further corporate interests has been fair game. As you'll learn in this book, in previous decades, a chemical company took to the Supreme Court a case asserting its Fourth Amendment right to privacy from the EPA, snooping into its illegal chemical discharges. Other corporations have asserted Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, as well as asserting the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War to strip slavery from the Constitution, asserting that it protects their right against discrimination by a local community that doesn't want them building a toxic waste incinerator, commercial hog operations, or superstores. If this trend continues, it's probably just a matter of time before a corporation claims the Second Amendment right to bear arms anywhere, anytime, and your credit card company's bill collector shows up at your home with a sidearm. This legal situation is not only bizarre, but also quite the opposite of the visions for this country held by the founders of the nation and the framers of the Constitution. They were sufficiently worried about corporate power that they didn't even include in the Constitution the word corporation, intending instead that the states should tightly regulate corporate behavior, which the states did quite well until just after the Civil War. The American Revolution, you'll learn in this book, was in fact provoked by the misbehavior of a British corporation. Our nation was founded in an anti-corporate power fury. The most significant and oft-quoted precedent of the turning point of corporate power in America began just after the Civil War. It rested on a constitutional amendment successfully written and passed by a group of radical Republicans after the Civil War. That's what they called themselves, radical Republicans, to take slavery out of the Constitution. Given that today's Republican Party has, largely since the robber baron era of the 1880s, been the party of big business and the very rich, it's a bit difficult for some people to get their minds around the possibility that the Republican Party started out as a reform party, that for nearly 70 years, from before Abraham Lincoln until just after Theodore Roosevelt left the party to start a third party, had a strong progressive wing. But the Republican Party did. Although Lincoln was, by today's standards, a moderate Republican, he was still anti-slavery, pro-middle class, and pro-labor. In fact, he famously said labor is superior to capital because it precedes capital. Nobody has wealth until somebody makes something. And he was the first president both to use the word strike in public and to actually stop police and private armies from killing and beating strikers. And just like in today's mainstream Democratic Party, where there's a progressive minority that always seems to be pushing the edges, in the Republican Party of the 1800s, there was a very, even by today's standards, progressive faction. The radical Republicans were a splinter group that emerged in a big way from the Republican Party at its founding in 1854. And just after the Civil War in 1866, they gained a majority among Republicans in the House of Representatives, where they had a powerful influence until the faction disintegrated in the 1870s during the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant. They supported the absolute right of freed slaves to vote and participate in government. It goes on from there. Unequal protection, corporate power. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Welcome back to our third hour. On the line with us is Joe Madison, host of The Joe Madison Show, weekdays 6 to 10 a.m. on SiriusXM Channel 126. Civil and human rights activist. His website, joemadison.com. You can tweet him at Madison SiriusXM. Joe, welcome back to the program.
Hey, it's glad to talk with you again, Tom. It's been a while, my goodness.
It has been, and I hope we can talk more often on the air. You just brought the house down at the Apollo Theater the other day, and in fact we had a clip of it, but I figured it would be better to talk with you than necessarily to play you, to play a clip of you. But it just with this, and you and I have been talking about this. Well, you've been talking about this on your show forever. The idea of a movement versus a moment, and and millennials. And before you go off on that, I just wanted to set up one other thing for you and see if this comports with your experience. You know, back in 1980, those of us who remember when, you know, we're little kids when Jack Kennedy became president, Kennedy had this national fitness program, and he pushed it out to all the schools. And the way that he did this, the federal government can't order schools what to do and say and what not to do and say, but there were federal standards for education. They were guidelines, but they weren't requirements. And Kennedy created a new guideline that was a physical fitness one, and it pushed out to every school in the country. And so we were doing jumping jacks in my school and all the Air Force exercises. And also among those was civics, right? Civics education, understanding how government works and the importance of the vote and all that. So when Reagan comes in 1980, he puts in charge of the education department, which comes up with these standards, Bill Bennett. Bill Bennett, who famously said, this is his Secretary of Education, Bill Bennett, who had campaigned on a platform of ending the Department of Education and had this to say just after the Reagan presidency.
But I do know that it's true that if you wanted to reduce crime, you could, if that were your sole purpose, you could abort every black baby in this country and your crime rate would go down. That would be an impossible, ridiculous, and morally reprehensible thing to do, but your crime rate would go down.
So that was Bill Bennett. And so what did he do? He blew up the national standards for education, took civics and government history out of them. And we've got a generation of kids who in many schools, not all schools, but in many schools in America, literally can't name the three branches of government. So, you know, we've got a big lift here, Joe, and I just threw a bunch of stuff at you. It's all yours. Go for it.
Well, I mean, my God, to be reminded of what Bill Bennett just said, I mean, it's right out of the 1930-40 playbook of Nazi Germany.
Yep.
That's the first thing that comes to my mind. I mean, it just sent chills down my spine. I mean, I guess if I wanted to play that and as it relates to what he said, I mean, maybe if we aborted some white people, we wouldn't have had folks going into a synagogue and shooting elderly people or shooting elderly black people in the back of their head or in a Kroger parking lot or blowing up an office building in Oklahoma. I mean, it's absurd. The point I made that I was making came about because of and let me give you something in your audience, something to look for. And I've been talking about this for years on my show. It's called the Willie Lynch Letter. The Willie Lynch Letter on how to make a slave. Now, reality, it's not a real letter, but it talks about the psychology of how to separate and have counter gang strategy, separate the slaves and get them fighting each other, the old against the young, the men against the women, the light skin against the dark skin. And so there was a discussion about, baby boomers versus millennials. And so I said, wait a minute, let's stop. Let's go back. 26, the presidential election. 50 years and older. 60 million of them went to vote. 60 million. And the lowest voter turnout was among millennials. Now, my point was, it doesn't make the Trumpettes any difference whether you're a baby boomer or a millennial. The reality is they're screwing over both of us. Grandma, baby boomer, grandma needs Medicare. Working mothers with young children that are out here struggling every day trying to make ends meet economically. They need Medicaid for their children. Young folk, the college tuition, loans, the fact that the financial institutions are getting are charging far more interest for their college loans than they should. The reality was they're coming after both of us. But the one thing I wanted millennials to understand, recognize that baby boomers bled for that right to vote. I heard John Lewis say something that would have fit perfectly what I said at the Apollo last Thursday. And that is, he bled on that bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, for the right to vote. He almost lost his life. And he said to his audience over the weekend, I'm not asking you to bleed. I'm asking you to vote. And I wanted young people to understand that it's not about going to a rally, getting back in your car, going back home, or going back to the class. Those are moments. We have to have a movement. And the difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice. All movements require sacrifice. And that's what John Lewis was talking about. That's what Oprah was talking about. And that's why people reacted last Thursday at the Apollo, because they understood that. And so I've just simply made the point that, look here, millennials, if you can stand in line to get the latest Apple or IT or whatever, or stand in line to get a pair of the latest athletic shoes, then you darn well can get your behind in line to vote tomorrow. And that's the point I was trying to make, that this is not, we should not be talking about millennials versus baby boomers, whose turn it is, that type of thing. Because let's understand what happened in the presidential election. Well, if Hillary doesn't win, I'm not going to, if she doesn't win the primary, I'm not going to vote. If Bernie doesn't win, I'm not going to vote. The reason we have Donald Trump today is not that the majority of people voted for him, but a vast majority of people didn't go vote at all.
Yep.
And if you get 60 million of baby boomers and you join them with the potential huge number of millennials, we win. We win big.
Amen. Amen. So do you think that it's possible? I mean, I've been trying to figure out why it is that millennials don't vote, and I don't have any statistical information to compare this generation of millennials with, for example, what would have been the equivalent generation 30 years ago, 40 years ago, with what we call baby boomers, when they, first got the right to vote. Although that was, I was, I think 20 when the voting age went down to 19, and it was a big deal and everybody was paying attention. We passed a constitutional convention or a constitutional amendment. But do you think that it's cultural? Is it media? Or is it the conspiracy theory that I floated when you first came on, that Bill Bennett, it took a decade or so for those guidelines changing to work their way through the system, and now you've got, particularly in red states, places where they just don't teach government at all in our elementary schools.
I don't know. It's probably all of the above. It's probably culture. I don't know what was happening on your show, but I can tell you that we were tagged, I don't know by who, but, folks are calling, voting doesn't count, voting doesn't make any difference.
Oh, yeah, I'm getting those.
Yeah, you got those. So,
it's a campaign from the Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. And primarily, let's be honest, it came from the Russians that were, out there trolling.
Yep.
Particularly African-American shows. I know we got hit, and all of a sudden it stopped after the election. But you know what? It is really sad when you think about it, because the thing about what I'm trying to get people to understand is that the purpose is to check the president of the United States, and particularly to check Trump, because they don't, you talking about don't understand the three branches of government. Man, they don't even understand, and they need to understand that whoever is the majority on Capitol Hill in Congress, they make the rules. I surprised people when I said, if a Democratic congressperson in a Republican majority House of Representatives wants to rent a room for a reception, let's say a room for Thom Hartmann and his group, and they have to get permission from the Republicans just to get a room for a reception.
Wow.
Let alone a piece of legislation that needs to be passed or needs to be debated. So this is about whoever is in the majority is the one that can control the hearings, is the one that can move the legislation. And that's really what we are talking about. And so it is. I don't know about you. I think, when I went to school in Ohio, you could not get a high school diploma unless you passed civics.
Yep. Same in Michigan.
Now that was a fact. You could be a look. You could
no
be
longer the case though.
Yeah, you could be a straight A student, and if you failed civics, you better take your butt to summer school and get that and pass civics because you could not get a diploma.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, that's the way it should be today.
Yeah, I agree. We need to bring this stuff back. Joe Madison, the great Joe Madison, the website joemadison.com. You can listen to him on SiriusXM weekdays every morning, 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM channel 126. You can tweet him at Madison SiriusXM. Joe, give our love to Sherry, and it's great to hear from you. Thanks so much for being on the program today.
God bless. The same to Louise.
Thank you. Good talking with you, Joe. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 18 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Oh, and what's going on with the evangelicals? And welcome back, Joe in Marshall, North Carolina. Hey, Joe, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Tom, very quickly, in North Carolina, we're being asked to vote for a constitutional amendment to strengthen protections for victims of crime and to ensure the enforcement of those rights. And that sounds great, but the enumerated rights that are already on the books will simply be followed by the words upon request, and a couple of places the words reasonable access will be added. But the most egregious part of it is there's an entire unit devoted to giving the General Assembly the constitutional authority to change the procedure whereby a victim may assert those rights. And the thing is just very deceptively worded.
So, Joe, let me get this right. In North Carolina, as a victim of a crime, you have a certain set of rights to get, compensation and whatever, make things right. And this ballot measure, which says that it's to help victims of crime, is actually watering down those rights and giving the legislature the power to easily water those rights down even further anytime they want. Is that what you're telling me?
That is correct. I have the text mailed to me from the State Board of Elections and Ethics Enforcement, and I'm reading the text, and that is exactly what it does. It's very deceptive.
Is that widely known in North Carolina, Joe?
I don't know, but Tom, I very sincerely appreciate you allowing me to bring it to the voters' attention.
Yeah, my pleasure. That's amazing.
Thanks for taking my call,
yeah,
my friend.
Joe, if you tweet that to me, I'll retweet it, and maybe we can get a conversation going on Twitter about this too. Okay?
That's very kind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Good talking to you, and I really appreciate the call. Rick in Lexington, Kentucky. Hey, Rick. Thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Thanks, Mr. Hartman, for taking my call. First of all, I'd like to tell you, you are my personal Mr. Rogers, and I hope you take that as a compliment.
I do. Thank you very much. Did you know that he lived about 2 blocks from that synagogue that got shot up?
Yes, I know.
It's amazing.
And I've been thinking that about you for quite a while now. You're pretty soothing. You keep a lot of people sane. You create an outlet for people to voice their opinion, and that's tremendous.
Thank you, Rick.
The question I wanted to ask you was, I had a pretty tough weekend, and just listening to the news, the shows all weekend, I was just curious. All weekend long, I heard descriptions of white people, and basically every description was like I talked to you before: Republican, conservative, evangelical. You just said it. Trump's base. The only description I hear on TV about black people is black people are African American. Okay? Any other group, it's the same thing. Trump won white men by 65% that voted, white women 55% that voted. I just think that it's a crime today before the election that anybody that has a microphone doesn't take the time to talk to white people today to get some kind of understanding that where we are in the country is up to white society.
Yeah.
Nobody voted more than 40% the other for Trump.
Yeah.
65 and 55. So as long as we don't have a conversation within the white community about do you want to live in America or do you want to live in the Confederacy?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, Rick. Thanks a lot for the call. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, people who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I saw this over at Democratic Underground, and I started to follow. DD Flag tweeted, and this is so funny. She actually spells out the B word here. I'm not going to say it on the air, but I'll just say B word. You know what I'm talking about, the word the pejorative to describe women that Donald Trump used in the Access Hollywood tape, right? And she writes, "Oh, I voted all right. I moved on that ballot like a bee. I got there with blood coming out of my whatever. I'm auto-attracted to polling stations. I just start filling in ovals. It's like a magnet. And when you're registered, they let you do it. You can do anything. Hashtag grab them by the ballot." I love it. I love it. It's brilliant. D2. Good on you. And like I said, you can see that on our Twitter feed over at Thom_Hartmann. White evangelicals. I mentioned white evangelicals. By the way, it was great hearing from Joe. Joe is so good and so solid on so many issues, and really, really knows his stuff. I mean, if you're listening, in particular, if you're listening to me on Sirius XM and you haven't checked out Joe's show, which comes on before our show, it's 6 to 10 a.m. On Sirius 126, you know, it's really worth checking out. And if you don't have Sirius XM, you know, this is a good reason to get it between me and Joe, and there's some other great programming there. But John Pavlovitz, this I also was cued to this by a post over on Democratic Underground. John Pavlovitz has a website, johnpavlovitz.com, Pavlovitz. And he wrote a piece called White Evangelicals. This is why people are through with you. And he's like, "Dear white evangelicals, I need to tell you something. People have had it with you. They're done. We don't want anything to do with you any longer." And then he goes through, you know, what's going on. He says, your hypocrisy, your inconsistency, your selective mercy, your thinly veiled supremacy. He said, for 8 years, we watched you relentlessly demonize a black president, a man faithfully married for 26 years, a doting father and husband without a hint of moral scandal or the slightest whiff of infidelity. They watched you, white evangelicals, deny his personal faith convictions, Obama's, argue his birthplace, and assail his character, all without cause or evidence. They saw you brandish scriptures to malign him and use the laziest of racial stereotypes to criticize him. You never offered public prayers for him and his family. You never welcomed him to your Christian universities. You never gave him the benefit of the doubt. You never spoke of offering him forgiveness or mercy. Your evangelist never publicly thanked God for his leadership. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I recommend you check out johnpavlovitz.com on this. But do you think that the white evangelical movement is going to continue down this racist road? Or might they wake up?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And I mean that as a serious question. I'm not sure they're going to wake up and attend to their own scripture. Today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's collected poems. This is the 1841 edition, but there's modern ones available too. It's the same poems. I want to start with a Psalm of Life, one of my favorites, one that I learned as a kid. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow finds us further than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb, driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Lives of, trust no future, however present. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act within the living present. Heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footsteps in the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, will take heart again. Let us then be up and doing with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing. Learn to labor and to wait. And the book opens with Voices of the Night, another of his brilliant poems. This is from the prelude. Pleasant it was when woods were green and winds were soft and low, to lie amid some sylvan scene where the long drooping boughs between, shadows dark and sunlight sheen, alternate come and go. Or where the denser grove receives no sunlight from above, but the dark foliage interweaves in one unbroken roof of leaves, underneath whose sloping eaves the shadows hardly move. Beneath some patriarchal tree I lay upon the ground, his hoary arms uplifted he, and all the broad leaves over me clap their little hands in glee with one continuous sound. A slumberous sound, a sound that brings the feelings of a dream, as of innumerable wings, as when a bell no longer swings, faint the hollow murmur rings, o'er meadow, lake, and stream. And dreams of that which cannot die, bright visions come to me, as lapped in thought I used to lie and gaze into the summer sky where the sailing clouds went by, like ships upon the sea. Dreams that the soul of youth engage, ere fancy has been quelled. Old legends of the monkish age, traditions of the saint and sage, tales that have the rhyme of age, and chronicles of eld. And loving still these quaint old themes, even in the city's throng, I feel the freshness of the streams that cross by glades and sunny gleams, water the green land of dreams, the holy land of song. Therefore at Pentecost, which brings the spring clothed like a bride, when nestling buds unfold their wings and bishops' caps have golden rings, musing upon many things, I sought the woodlands wide. The green trees whispered low and mild, it was a sound of joy. They were my playmates when a child, and rocked me in their arms so wild, but they looked at me and smiled, as if I were a boy. And ever whispered, mild and low, come be a child once more. and wave their long arms to and fro, and beckon solemnly and slow. Oh, I could not choose but go into the woodlands hoar, into the blithe and breathing air, into the solemn wood, solemn and silent everywhere. Nature with folded hands seemed there, kneeling at her evening prayer. Like one in prayer, I stood. Before me rose an avenue of tall and sombrous pines. Abroad their fan-like branches grew, and where the sunlight darted through, spread a vapor soft and blue, in long and sloping lines. And falling on my weary brain, like a fast falling shower, the dreams of youth come back again, low lispings of the summer rain, dropping in the ripening grain, once upon the flower. Visions of childhood, stay, oh stay, ye were so sweet and wild, and distant voices seemed to say, it cannot be, they pass away, other themes demand the lay, thy lay, thou art no more a child. The land of song within thee lies, watered by living springs. The lids of Fanny's sleepless eyes are grates into that paradise. Holy thoughts like stars arise, its clouds are angels' wings. Learn that henceforth thy song shall be, not mountains capped with snow, no forests surrounding like the sea, nor rivers flowing ceaselessly where the woodlands bend to see the bending heavens below. There is a forest where the din of iron branches sounds, a mighty river roars between, and whoever looks therein sees the heavens all black with sin, sees not its depths nor bounds. Look then into thine heart and write, yes, into life's dream, a deep stream. Longfellow.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And right-wing, Martin Zizmaro over at Raw Story wrote this brilliant piece. The headline, right-wing extremists becoming the same phenomena as ISIS. Now, that's the bad news. Then comes the worst news, but there is a, quote, Bermuda Triangle of intelligence on them. In other words, we've got a terrorist movement that has grown in the United States over the last 20 years or so, really rapidly and really substantially, basically since 9/11. And in fact, I mean, so extraordinarily that according to the Anti-Defamation League, 71% of extremist-related fatalities in the United States between 2008 and 2017, basically the last 10 years, were committed, 71% were committed by members of the far right or the far right white supremacist movements. But there are currently no intelligence reports that the chief of police in Florida, where Richard Spencer went, could find on the alt-right. It was like just no information. It's like, what the heck is up with this, right? This Bermuda Triangle of intelligence. The report goes on to, so you're telling us there's nothing? This guy said no names we can plug into the automatic license plate readers, no players with a propensity for violence, no one you have in the system, nothing, says this Florida police chief. He says, it's incredible. I mean, here we've got the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, they know about this. And in fact, they've broken up a few of these recently. But we're not dealing with terrorism in this country as if it were terrorism when it's being committed by white people, is the bottom line. So just a heads up. And another reason, I mean, of course, this is the consequence of the Republican Party by and large. And it's something that we need to do something about. I mean, you'll recall when the FBI issued that report in 2008, while George Bush was still president, they completed the report at the end of 2008 while Bush was still president. And about 3 months into Obama's presidency in 2009, they issued the report on right-wing extremist activity in the United States. There was such a blow-up on right-wing hate radio and on Fox state-run media or Trump-run media, that billionaire-run media, There was such a blow up that Obama said to the FBI, "Take it back. Don't publish it." Right? We're not. They had the preceding report had been on Muslim terrorism, and we all saw that. But the one on right wing, no. Obama backed down, and nobody has stepped up since. And of course, Trump isn't going to. It's bizarre. Rob in Iron Mountain, Minnesota. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
I don't know. I start with one thing, and all of a sudden I listen to the program long enough, and guess what? All of a sudden I got two things, and they're both together at the same time. It's where you were talking earlier about Trump on the couch and the way his psychological makeup is kind of made. And the only thing I can say is that America, you're being duped. I was a cross-country truck driver for quite a long time, and in the last couple of days, it's where I've actually dug into what happened with the Trump tax scam, the Republican tax scam. And the whole thing is for me being a truck driver, I was able to use Schedule A to be able to maximize deductions.
Right.
That has been taken away from us completely.
Right.
I lost $11,000 in deductions, which increases my income.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of deductions, including the ability to deduct state income taxes, which Scaramucci was admitting.
Real estate taxes, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
When you come down to it,
all the tax.
The whole thing that I.
Go ahead, Rob.
The next thing is you got Trump on the couch and America being duped. It's where, guess what? If you got a book about Trump being on the couch, how about a Trump voter being on the couch?
Yeah.
And the way they're being fooled.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent, I think that you can lay the blame for this in the media. I guarantee you that Fox News and Right Wing Hate Radio never even mentioned the fact that the deductions that were done away with in the Republican tax scam were deductions taken largely like 90%, by working people. And from people making, $120,000 down, right? Long haul truck drivers, people who live in high income states, things like that. And the deductions that were added were deductions for extremely high income people like Donald Trump, or preserved, for example, the real estate deduction, which is bizarre. The ability, if you had a loss to your trucking business, Rob, you have to take that loss in the year in which it occurred. If you had instead been in Donald Trump's business, in the real estate business, you could spread that loss over a 20-year period, or maybe it's an 18-year period, and every single year reduce your taxable income and thus your taxes. In fact, Trump apparently paid no taxes at all for at least 16 years simply because of this. So, yeah.
Well, again, you
got
to go the other way, too. It's where with the standard deduction right now, they upped it to $12,000. A person like me is never going to be able to take advantage of that. But these people with their ultimate really big homes with $1 million mortgages and stuff like that, guess what? They're going to be able to do it because they're going to be able to beat that $12,000 standard deduction. We won't.
Yep. Absolutely. It was pure and simple a tax cut for the billionaires. Rob, thanks a lot for the call. Good talking to you. Corky and very informative. Thank you, Rob, for that. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, what's up?
I tell you, truck drivers are smart.
Amen.
I was the long haul.
Oh, you were? You were a long haul truck driver?
Yeah.
I was always fascinated by that. When I was young, I actually kind of fantasized about that. I never went down that road. I had a good friend who was a long haul truck driver, and it just seemed like the coolest thing. But that was back in the 60s and 70s when before Reagan's union busting came in and before they deregulated the trucking industry. So now, truck drivers are really, under pressure, from their companies.
Underpaid, under pressure.
Yep.
Yeah, what I wanted to say about Trump, I don't understand why America does not understand this man has no interest in governing. He's only got interest in campaigning.
That's right.
And he's who's running the country? He's been out on the campaign trail for probably the last 6 months.
He's turned the White House over to the deep state, over to the permanent bureaucrats in Washington.
Yeah, nobody's running the country.
Yep.
But he is the biggest snake oil salesman I've ever seen. And America has bought it. They bought it. The magic elixir that fixes everything.
Yeah.
Off the back of the wagon. I just can't understand how people can be so duped.
Yep.
You know,
it's
it amazes me.
Yeah, I agree, Corky. I absolutely agree. And, you know, I think that if it weren't for a billionaire, Rupert Murdoch, starting a television propaganda network, Fox News, and if it weren't for a couple of billion-dollar corporations, and in one case, a couple of billionaire brothers starting a couple of radio companies that now own most of the radio stations in this country, and only put right-wing programming on them. If it wasn't for, you know, basically the widespread and easy availability of Fox News and right-wing hate radio, I don't think Trump could get away with this. I think the American people are smart enough that they would figure out what a scam it is. But, you know, unfortunately, when you're inundated, when you're just being washed over with propaganda, it can be a damn hard thing to challenge. Phil in Asheville, North Carolina, listening on The Revolution. Hey, Phil, thanks for listening. What's up?
Well, anyway, something I don't hear any people talking about is, say the Democrats win the Congress or there's a blue wave and maybe the Senate, and then there's a big economic crash shortly down the road or within the next year or so. Who's going to get the blame for it? Trump's already coming out and saying if the Democrats win, you're going to lose a lot of money. So he's preparing for this possibility.
Oh, he's not just preparing for it. He's planning on it because there will be a dip in the economy. It's already started. Housing starts are down. I mean, there's all kinds of leading indicators indicating that the next 12 months are going to be bad for both the stock market and the general economy. The question is how bad. And yes, 100% Trump has not only telegraphed it, but proclaimed it, that he's going to blame the Democrats. The question is, how will the news media handle this? Will they simply play Trump's things unrebutted, as they so often do? Like the morning MSNBC shows, will they continue to have right-wing apologists on, and CNN as well, right-wingers who come on and just literally lie through their teeth and nobody challenges them? Or are they going to start telling the truth? I am not holding my breath, Phil, but you're spot on. You've identified a real issue. Ron in Ruidoso, New Mexico. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today? Ron? Okay, Ron, you got to listen to your phone, not your TV. There is a delay that happens. I'm going to hit a break here so that we can, we'll pick this up on the other side. But, we've got an obscenity delay here, so if somebody drops an F-bomb or something, we can push a button and it vanishes. But on top of that, it takes another half a minute or so for all the electrons to get from here up to the satellites, off to your house, to, everything else. So when you're on hold, turn down your TV or your radio. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. Welcome back. Steve in Bath, Indiana. Hey, Steve, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hi, thanks a lot for taking my call. I have a billion things to talk about, but I'll try to just stick to one thing because I know you have a lot of different people who want to call in.
Thank
you. One of the things that kind of occurs to me is that the dominant way of talking about our politics might be based on a fallacy, which is this idea that everything we can talk about, all of our truths are kind of located from a spectrum, like from the far left to the far right and everything in the middle. But it just occurs to me that if you look at anything like the melting point of gold or whether or not there's a tree outside of your house, it doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a conservative or if you're left or right. That tree's there and the melting point of gold doesn't change. So it just makes me wonder if this is kind of a side effect of our two-party system, that we kind of locate the idea of truth as being instead of a fixed point where you have the actual truth, but instead it's just kind of slides around depending on whatever ideological bent you kind of ascribe yourself to.
Well, the melting point of gold isn't going to change, and it's not debatable. You're absolutely right. You're talking about the laws of nature. But the laws of human behavior and interaction not only changeable, but they're also debatable. I mean, what is the nature of an economy? How should an economy be run? Who does the economy serve? How does it come about? How does capitalism work? All these things have actually not only have the laws and the rules changed over the years, but our understanding of them have changed. And many of them, we still have imperfect understandings of them. And so when that's the situation, you get one group of people who says, well, this is the way I think it works. You get another group of people who says, well, this is the way I think it works. And there is no absolute immutable law of nature. Both sides can produce anecdotal evidence for their argument. Then it gets political. With economics, that's very often the case. The obvious difference, and then the Republicans try to claim that everything from gender identity to everything else, all the social issues fall in that category. I don't think they do, but I think they're more like the laws of nature. But then you also get this out of this intrinsic desire to demonize the other, on the basis of this, and then pretty soon it just all becomes political, Steve.
It just makes me wonder if it's a divide and conquer issue, though, because
of course
if we
it is.
Keep dividing ourselves and saying, well, it doesn't really matter whether there's a tree outside my house. What matters is what my party thinks or what my group of people thinks I should say about the tree.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a tree or there's not. I mean, it just seems to me that it's kind of more of a matter of different people expressing opinions which are closer to the truth or further from the truth.
Well, where that's writ large, Steve, is climate change. You've got an entire political party in the United States, literally the only political party in the entire world that denies climate change. And the science is irrefutable at this point.
Right. I mean, but it just seems to me that if we can agree that there are truths like that, then why can't we just make it a matter of figuring out what the truth is instead of kind of believing, I think it's fallaciously, that it's not about truth that we're really debating, but instead that the truth just is a kind of a myth.
Yeah, I get it. Increasingly, and this should be the job of the media. Increasingly, we should be talking about this. Here are the facts. Here's what so-and-so said. Here are the facts. Here's what so-and-so said. Just straight on down. Steve, thanks for the call. It's a good point. We'll be right back. It's 49 minutes past the hour. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, people who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Back to your calls. Russ in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Russ, thanks for listening to X-Ray FM. What's up?
Tom, I'm just question for you. Why do you think it is that so many baby boomers who are on Medicare and Social Security are going to vote Republican in this election, even though it is beyond dispute? The Republicans have made it very clear they are going to gut, that's G-U-T, these programs to pay for another tax cut for the millionaires, billionaires, and corporations. And it astounds me that they could do this, but I've talked to a number who are going to do that very thing. What do you think's going on here?
I think it's Fox News, Russ. I mean that seriously. The average age of Fox News viewers is around 70, and Fox News is the only cable TV news channel that runs news or something that looks like news pretty much 24/7 live The other networks have, all kinds of specials and documentaries and, lock them up and all that kind of stuff. CNN and MSNBC try to, quote, present balance. Fox News doesn't even pretend to. Fox News has a huge audience, and, the billionaire Rupert Murdoch put together a news network that would cause average working people to believe that the interests of the billionaires is in their best interest. And they do a very, very good job of that. And you got right-wing hate radio, too. A lot of boomers grew up on that. Radio was a big deal back in the 80s when Limbaugh rolled out his show, Political Radio. He was the first, after the murder of Alan Berg in the 70s, there was about a decade where there was no political talk radio. And then Limbaugh came along. He was very talented, but he also had a lot of money behind him. He rolled that show out on 50 major stations all across the country. And, I think that's what it is. And then you combine that with the fact that people who watch ABC, CBS, NBC, or Fox television, in other words, they watch TV on their regular TV, which again is more likely to be older people, never hear any political news at all, other than 30 minutes, on Monday through Friday nights. And they go out of their way to try to not be partisan, which means cutting the Republicans a lot of slack. So I think it's the media, Russ. What do you think?
I think you're right. I was talking to a 71-year-old woman last night. I've been doing some phone work for a political campaign, and she was telling me that it's the Democrats that want to cut Medicare and Social Security.
Right. They've said that multiple times on Fox News. It's a blatant lie. Fox News lies all the time. There's go to MediaMatters.org. They document it on a literally day-by-day basis.
Yeah.
But that's,
well, thanks, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Russ. That's what's going on, and that's the cancer. To paraphrase, I mean, keep in mind, 27 August 2018, Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, wrote an op-ed in the Sydney Morning Herald titled "The Cancer Eating the Heart of Australian Democracy." And what's that cancer? Rupert Murdoch. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, I can't agree with you more on that last point. I just wanted to say, voter ID here is I can bring in a utility bill and have my neighbor come in with me and vouch that I live at that address, and that's enough to get me registered. And then once I'm registered, all I need is my signature. And I don't understand why we have to have all these complicated documents with our picture on it, et cetera, because
we don't.
There's a voter, voter suppression is a real thing, but voter fraud is almost non-existent. And why would somebody put themselves in a position to commit that? It's really not an issue. It's only an issue because, as you were talking about with Fox News, they have decided to make it an issue, and Chris Kobach and Kemp in Georgia have decided to make it an issue, but it is not an issue. I wish it would just end, but since we don't have a truthful media system, we have no way of moving on from it, but I'm really tired of it. But we function here really well. I have seen no cases in the 26 years that I've been a resident of Minnesota of voter fraud.
Yeah, no, and there probably haven't been any because you go to prison for it. I mean,
right.
we have laws, and that's been enough, and it should continue to be enough. But here's the deal: I did a deep dive on this over the weekend, John, because I wanted to write this op-ed.
Sure.
And in the 1870s, Reconstruction happened. The early, late 1860s, early 1870s. And you had black people in the South becoming sheriffs, becoming justices of the peace, becoming, police officers, voting, elected. Actually, I think it was South Carolina. The majority of the legislature was black for one electoral session. And as a result of that, the white backlash, what they were called black code laws, the earliest of those were voter registration laws. Voter registration did not exist in most states at that point in time. And so they started passing these voter registration laws with very stringent requirements of what you had to do in order to become, quote, eligible to vote. And that was used to suppress the black vote, well, literally to this day. It's being used to suppress the black vote. So that's the history of voter registration. And that's, and how and why it is so just totally friggin' crazy and unnecessary. And voter ID, the same thing. I mean, who wants to go to jail for between 2 and 5 years, depending on the state you're in, for voting when you're not eligible to vote? It happens, it does happen that people go to jail for this. So, voter fraud, like you said, is non-existent. Nobody wants to take that kind of a risk, or very few people, maybe 5 or 10 people a year, literally nationwide, out of millions and millions of votes. John, thank you for the call. Well said. It's a fascinating day. Tomorrow is the big day, right? It's going to get real interesting, and we'll be talking about it right here. Same bat time, same bat place, so check it out. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Don't just you get out to vote. Make sure, take responsibility for helping 2 or 3 other people get out to vote tomorrow, too. Tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke.